Excuse me, Your Worship, you're live whenever you're ready to go.
Thank you, Stephanie. All right, Council, it's 5 p.m. and I will call the meeting of June 28 to order. Today, I'll start off with a changed land acknowledgement. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabek, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who cared for their families and communities the way we now seek to care for ours. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe-Wasaga Treaty of 1818 and respects all of the nation-to-nation agreements that have formed relationships with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. The reality of our shared history, the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community, and seeks to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better, to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community nation to nation. Before I look for a motion to adopt the agenda, I have a statement I will be reading on behalf of Council with respect to the upcoming Canada Day. July 1st is traditionally a time to reflect with pride and gratitude on this country we are fortunate to call home. Through the crisis of the pandemic over the past 18 months, we have seen countless demonstrations of compassionate support locally and nationally that defines and exemplifies the best of Canadians. The recent discovery of hundreds of unmarked graves of children at former residential school sites is a stark reminder of a tragic and shameful part of Canada's past. The town of Collingwood is strongly committed to inclusion and diversity. We know there can be no forward progress without recognition of the past. We can and should collectively hold ourselves accountable for the acts of the past. We can use this awareness to forge ahead constructively in support of and in consultation with the communities these past actions have so grievously harmed. Together, we can become a municipality that leads by example and embraces the new learnings that are needed to acknowledge and celebrate all of our community members equally. We are Canadian, and together we can do better. On July 1st, 2021, we invite our community to observe, reflect upon, and share a recognition of the past. Our call is for all residents and visitors to take time to acknowledge the truths of our collective history. We call for support for those for whom the suffering and the legacy of the residential schools continues. We call for Collingwood to be part of an actions that lead to reconciliation. It is in this spirit that the town of Collingwood presents the We Canada project. We Canada is an invitation to contemplate our collective history and cultural diversity. Together we can unite on this land we love, and together we can take action to build pathways towards solidarity, shared understanding, and reconciliation. We Canada challenges us to take meaningful steps forward, to be inclusive with our words and intentions, and to celebrate the strengths that unite us. What can each of us do as individuals, as neighbors, and as a community to bring about change? How can we build a system which acknowledges our shared history, honors the lives tragically taken, and fuels our collective growth as a nation? Let's share our intentions with each other. This Canada Day, may we take a pause to be kind, listen to the stories being shared, and be part of the pathway to change. With that, I will look for a motion to adopt the agenda. And the motion reads that the content of the council agenda for June 28, 2021 be adopted as amended. Additional items, we're removing one item, sorry, in camera item removed, 12.1B Collingwood Airport, and reasons for in camera update, 12.1 in camera. Are there any questions or comments before I call? Well, got it moved by Councillor Madigan and Councillor Berman. Thank you, you're ahead of me. Seeing no comments, I will call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations today? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I have two this evening. Under the regular council agenda, 7.1.1, as it pertains only to PW 2021-12, the traffic calming portion with respect to Cameron Street Public School, as a family member owns property directly south and adjacent to this street upon which the traffic calming is proposed. And in camera, item 4.1 with respect to the Culbert Estate, as I am on the board of directors of a principal in that matter.
Thank you, Councillor. And remind me when we get to item 7.1.1 to sever off that portion so that you can vote on the balance, please.
Well, thank you.
Are there any other declarations, Council? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that position, please let us know. That brings us to item 4.1, adoption of the minutes. And the motion reads that the minutes of the council meeting held June 21, 2021 be approved as presented. I'll look for a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Manning and Councillor Berman, you guys are fast out of the gates tonight. Are there any errors or omissions before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. And business arising from the previous minutes, and I believe Deputy Clerk Dahl has something she'd like to add on that. Go ahead, Becky, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So it's come to our attention that the May 30th minutes, there was an error. It was in the motion with respect to the RFP for the expansion of the wastewater treatment plant and the UV filtration retrofit. So the friendly amendment was not included in the minutes that were approved last week. So the clerk's department will be updating those minutes to reflect that friendly amendment.
Good, thank you for that. Council, is there any other business arising out of the previous minutes? Seeing none, we'll move on to community announcements, and we'll start with item 5.1, the update on water capacity and land use planning study, and I'll turn it over to CAO Skinner. Go ahead, Sonia, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And for our normal practice weekly with these updates, we do have a short deck that I'll ask the clerk's office to please put on screen. So I'm doing this update on behalf of the Public Works Engineering and Environmental Services group, that's Director Slama, as well as the planning group, which is Interim Director Glenn. So I'll do the delivery, but if there are detailed questions afterward, we have both of these directors available for those. Next slide, please. So this is the resolution that we're addressing, that each meeting until the interim control bylaw is lifted will include updates, and I can commit that we've updated all of these items per council's instruction. Next slide, please. So the situation, as I think you're aware, is that we do have a current water supply that is safe and it is available for people who are here in Collingwood. There's no concerns whatsoever with the quality of our water. And as soon as they were aware of this difficult situation, as council members know, and I hope as any listeners will know, council took a very proactive and transparent approach to both seeking further capacity and managing that which is remaining. It's been an exceptionally high priority, both for council and for staff. One of the first decisions was to maximize the chlorine treatment that we could do. And in fact, we're looking at other options to make sure that we've done everything we can in that regard with a third party. And with that change, we have several years of growth available, but still not enough guaranteed to get us to the expected 2025 plant expansion. So council used a tool available to them, which was the interim control bylaw. It temporarily and transparently pauses most development, generally that which uses water on sites that don't have water right now, so that we can grow as a complete community, having things like employment lands and different types of housing available, stores, institutions, as we proceed toward that plant expansion. So you'll get an update today on the land use policy study that that is being undertaken, the accelerated construction of the new water treatment plant and some of our interim solutions and our other options to seek water. And I just wanted to assure folks that work that does not use more water, such as most residential renovations and additions, can continue. Please speak to the town information line or the building department, or look on our website for the Engage Collingwood updates on this topic. If anyone has questions, we'd like to make sure people get answers as soon as possible. Next slide, please. So first I'll talk about the water capacity. Next slide. So we have received 4 comprehensive, excellent proposals from engineering consultants that are proposing to design the expanded water treatment plant. We've completed the preliminary evaluation and we're scheduling a meeting with the highest ranked proponent to push that forward. With respect to the third-party review of our chlorine options, conversations continue with the consultants and their proposals are being evaluated. For New Tecumseth, we are looking at continuing with our internal discussions. We've had a discussion with New Tecumseth and we're continuing with our internal discussions on the agreement conditions to ensure that we have the best agreement for Collingwood moving forward. So that is taking quite a bit of my time and several of the directors' time right now, because we know that this is something we'd like to push forward at speed. And as well as I mentioned last week, we did send letters to both New Tecumseth and the Town of the Blue Mountains councils, looking for them to commit to a reduction of the bulk water supply that they purchased from Collingwood. Next slide, please. So on the drinking water treatment plant expansion, no change from last week in this diagram. The dark colors, blue, are the completed tasks. So we hope that maybe by next week or the week after, we'd be able to slide a shade in the next item, which would be awarding the engineering design. And then of course here over on the right side, the discussion with New Tecumseth about the reduced supply and finalizing the agreement with New Tecumseth are also well underway. Slide 7, please. So in the remaining water supply, this is as of the 28th of June. However, I don't think there's any changes from the last update. In the winter, which is our current constraint, the single dwelling unit equivalents that we have left for water are 863. And that's during the winter. And we are planning to provide an update to council with respect to recommended exemptions that will of course reduce that number. In the far bottom right, the remaining summer single development units worth of water left are 1,773. And of course, summer and winter are different, not only because a plant can treat different amounts of warm and cold water, but also because people in town use different amounts of water in the summer and winter, and they do actually use more water in the summer. Next slide, please. I'm going to flip over now to the land use planning policy study. Next slide, please. So we're progressing well on this piece. We're into now carrying out the study. And I expect by next week, we'll be able to give you more detailed dates between today and the end of the interim control bylaw, as we now have the consultant on board and are kicking off the work. Next slide, please. The biggest news here, the newest news, is that the exemption request deadline ended on June 18th. Great appreciation once again to the development community. And I believe we did report last week that we had 66 exemption requests that we're now substantially into the evaluation of these. There are about 1,475 single development units worth of water that are in those 66 requests, and plus somewhat more, as several of the requests from the industrial, commercial, or institutional side didn't specify their actual water requests. So it will be in total somewhat higher than the 1,475. So our intention is to, per our schedule we'd provided previously, to bring the recommendations on any further exemptions to council in July. So those are exemptions that would take place during the interim control bylaw itself. And as we had mentioned earlier, the consultant for the land use planning study has been announced, and it's Meridian with GM Blue Plan and GLPI, who is a facilitation consultant. We now have a steering committee established internally with senior staff. And I mentioned the Gantt chart that we're developing that will set out when public consultation, different deliverables, et cetera, will be coming forward. And I believe that is the end. Thank you very much. And myself and either of the directors are available should the mayor wish to entertain any questions.
Thank you, CAO. Council, any questions or comments on the updates? Thank you for that thorough update, CAO Skinner, and you're right, it continues to be our #1 priority. So I'm happy to hear things are moving forward. I will then go around the table for community announcements, starting with Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson, through you to my colleagues and the community as a whole. Just to piggyback on your announcement as it relates to the 1st of July, tomorrow morning there's a special meeting of the BIA at 8 o'clock. And you know, for the past year and a half, through these challenging times, I think that the BIA has done a very good job as being a beacon of light within the community. They really have come through not only last summer, but again this spring as it relates to the farmers market. It's been a huge success. Again, we spoke to it many occasions about last December in terms of how they elevated spirits with the lights, et cetera, and the Christmas tree. And at the same time, they were also able to pivot quite nicely when things changed and we had to close the Christmas market earlier than anticipated as a result of COVID. And so with that in mind, and with the tragic events that have come forward out of British Columbia and Saskatchewan, and certainly it's inevitable that there will be more announcements in forthcoming with regards to more discoveries. The BIA is doing some serious soul searching as to how they would like to be able to reflect and celebrate at the same time. It's a difficult balance when you are trying to celebrate a commercial entity within a year that has been the COVID backdrop, at the same time being respectful of what's transpired in the last month. And as I mentioned, they've done extremely well as it relates to things like the market and the holiday season. And I have no doubt that whatever is decided tomorrow will be considerate, reflective, and will be, again, something that we can be proud of as a community to look at our downtown and say they got it right. So I look forward to being able to report as to what that outcome will be of tomorrow morning as it relates to July 1st. I'd also just like to quickly point out, because I don't think that we meet again as a council prior, that it's unfortunate, it's my opinion only, that we live in 2021 and yet as the backdrop to Euro 2020, which is the football championships, European football championships, the backdrop story has been now that countries like Turkey and Hungary are clamping down on LGBTQ rights. And so now you've got countries like the Netherlands who are speaking up and saying, if you're not a progressive country and you're not a nation builder, then perhaps you should leave the European Union. So with all that said, we as a community, and there have been a number of things that have happened lately that I think are very progressive, they're respectful, they are celebratory. And as we wrap up what is typically known throughout the month of June as Pride Month, we can look forward to Pride Collingwood in July. And that is, if I have the weekend correct, and I just better double check, it's the 16th, 17th. And it's a very, very progressive event. It's an online event. You can go to pridecollingwood.com to find out more information. And I encourage those that if you haven't checked it out, please do. If you haven't registered and you're interested, please do. It's a very, very exciting lineup. And again, this event and those who are behind it will do Collingwood proud. And lastly, very quickly, I just would like to, I think that it was acknowledged last week, but I'd like to send out my best wishes to all those who are graduating, and in particular, those who are graduating from grade 12, whether it be from Collingwood Collegiate or Our Lady of the Bay, or Pretty River Academy, or another one of our schools within the area. So the very best wishes to those who are graduating, to a successful summer, and to wherever their endeavors take them in the fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I know that Dr. Miller and Andrew Siegwertz and the members of the Rainbow Club, as well as the Pride Festival organizing group, have been very hard at work. So July 16, 17 will be a big festival. It will be the inaugural of, we hope, many years of celebrations to come. Councillor McLeod, all the way from Perry Sound.
Thank you. Humphrey, actually. And I'd like to thank Seguin Township's library for providing tonight's Wi-Fi. I'd like to take a moment tonight to remember Mr. Knox, Dave Knox. It's so hard when they're your teacher to call them by their name, Mr. Knox. He was a geography teacher at Collingwood Collegiate Institute from 1970 to about 1998. And he passed away last week. I remember Mr. Knox was always really emotional at Remembrance Day ceremonies when I was at the high school, but I didn't realize at the time, and I only found out this week, that that was because his own father was killed in action in World War II. Mr. Knox was born in 1944, so he never met his dad. He was a geography teacher, but he was also a man of many, many interests. And if you'll indulge me, I just want to tell a cute little story. He told my grade 10 geography class about how one day in the future, we would have a card that we could take to a store and we would touch a machine with it, and it would take money out of our bank account and put it in the bank account of the store. And we in the class scoffed because that was crazy. And it was 1985 and no one had imagined yet debit cards, but he'd already heard about it. It was just a really, really interesting person. Mr. Knox led the track team. He hosted a radio show featuring music from the 50s and the 60s. And for the last 20 years following his retirement, he was a steward in the Blue Mountains section of the Bruce Trail and kept watch over hundreds of acres of Bruce Trail, including the 45 acres acquired in the 1990s by the Bruce Trail Conservancy from my family. He will be sorely missed by his widow and the family's 3 children, and indeed by the town itself. And if I may, I would like to offer this council's gratitude for a life well lived and many, many students well served in his classes.
Thank you. And our condolences to Mr. Knox's family and friends on the loss. Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Deputy Mayor touched on the grads, and I touched on it last week. And tonight I'd like to wish a happy graduation to my daughter, who is at her graduation right now, minus her mom. And she's much cooler and better than myself, because she understood there was a vote tonight on the 40 kilometers that I had committed to being a part of. And I appreciate her understanding and a promise that I'm one to make up for things with ice cream. So there's no doubt a double scoop in her very near future. And the Deputy Mayor also talked about football. I like his European reference. Soccer is part of return to play coming up very soon here in town. So 2 things. I think that's great news for as much sport for our youth to return as possible. They certainly deserve it and they need it. And to Director Culver and through him to his staff, they do an outstanding job at all of our outdoor locations, and it's much appreciated by the community. And the soccer pitches are always beautiful, and I'm sure as all the ball diamonds and everything else. So we look forward to seeing our newly graduated youth and all our youth back to play, where they can get all the wiggles out as well as out of their parents' hair. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and congratulations to Sunny. And you'll miss the days when ice cream will do the trick when they go on to university. So enjoy it now. Councillor Madigan.
I have nothing tonight other than just to say very well spoken, Councillor McLeod. He was a great guy, and Kevin and James will continue his legacy in our community of giving back. But well put.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to wish this council and all of staff and all of our residents a very happy Canada Day. Our thoughts will be on national pride, and they will also be on reconciliation, diversity, and acceptance. It has been a tough year. It's been a tough year nationally, provincially, and certainly in this community. We don't have to mention. But with all that said and all considered, there is no other place I would rather live than this town, in this province, in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Well said. Councillor Berman. Saving your words. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So something a little different for me this evening. I've been very responsible with my community announcement times over the past. And at our FCM conference recently, the theme was forward, and one of the major sponsors was the National Arts Centre, and what part of the sponsorship was to ask 3 Canadian poets to write a poem on the theme of forward. And I'm going to ask staff to show the video of one of those poems, which I think is so important for us, for community leaders, for our community, and for our municipal staff. It's Tanya Davis out of PEI. She'll introduce herself anyway. But I think it's a really important community message for all of us. So I've just asked staff to tee it up for me. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Tanya Davis. I am based in Epicwet, PEI, and I'm really happy to be here virtually doing a poem for your conference. I think forward is a great theme. I was excited to write something specifically for this because it gave me to think about. And so here's a poem. It's called Forward, and it is for you, gathering and doing the work that you do. We're taught to spring forward like time changes, like Jackson boxes pop up. We are to rush the gates of it like we're in a race with it, jump guns to chase endings we'll never make it to, since there's always work to do and the finish line is ever moving. Still, we will pursue it. We are in cahoots with the idea of conclusion, or at least progress. We like to check off boxes. And why not? Life is sweet, but life is hard. If we can make it easier, then let us do our part. But what is our part to do? What greater whole are we contributing to? Sometimes it's clear, and some years it's blurry. Just us and our worries, at home in our PJs. We put on our Zoom clothes to log into meetings, but we can't trade handshakes, trade jokes at lunch break. Even though our hearts ache, we go forward like the days. We go forward because we can't go back, and that's just the direction that life takes. But we don't have to align our progress with battles or races. We need not chase aces like we ought to stay gracious when changes knock us off our bases. And when we feel courageous, great, that energy can be contagious. But we should find patience for the times we can't take it. And then we should find reminders that others help us face it. It being the future and also the now. The work to do, the solutions to find, the why and the how. How to recover from something that's still not over. How to move forward when there's no closure, with certain problems coming closer and other ones so far over there it's hard to see how they even affect us. Although maybe it's easier now that we've had this challenge to connect us. No matter town or city or dirt road access, we've all been anxious. We know we all need access to resources and happiness. If we exist in partnership for equity, not excesses, imagine the future we could shape. Go forward from here, but at your own pace. Go forward at a tempo that supports collaboration, that allows for pauses to acknowledge collective losses and individual devastation. Go forward with scars and bruises. Go forward with hearts on sleeves and tear-stained faces. Go at the speed of your community's needs, shifting gears as the landscape keeps changing. Go forward with recognition of the complexities we're living and what we have in common. Life in this moment, a future unknown but worth working for. A global home deserving of our stewardship, and every human in it worthy of our care. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Anything to add?
No, I just think it was very poignant, and it probably addressed a lot of council's comments tonight. And I am deducting the time out of my FCM report under other business. So I thought it was important.
It was a very good message, and moving forward is a critical piece. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, as people are enjoying our non-essential shops moving to 25% occupancy this weekend, I just wanted to remind everyone to think about walking down Simcoe Street and enjoying the art from all of the support that's given by the BMFA to our artist community in the shop for the Blue Mountain Foundation for the Arts. It's open Saturday and there are new exhibits right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. And to piggyback on that, on this Wednesday, June 30, we'll be moving into stage 2. So patios will be getting bigger and stores will be able to have more traffic through the store. And my understanding is that the hairdressers and haircutters, barbers might get active, which is good for me because I'm about 2 days away from a lawn boy hit and run. So I encourage everyone to get out. This time of year is usually a time of optimism as we head into July 1st, and we've got some challenges to face, but we can do those together. And I will be speaking to that later under notice of motion that I have. And so I want everyone to, as we transition into summer, to be mindful of traffic on the streets, children on the streets playing, and to be safe and respectful. And hopefully we will have a healthy, safe summer. So we'll move on then to item 6, which is the consent agenda. And the resolution reads that council herein receive the general consent agenda and motions identified below be approved. And further, that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are those of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. And there are 4 items today. Item 6.1, Tom Sinclair, Cranberry Golf Course redesignation. 6.2, Paul Sloan, Cranberry Golf Course redesignation. 6.3, Community Connection, Shelter Feasibility Study Report and Futures of Services. And item 6.4, Town of Wasaga Beach, Conservation Authorities Regulatory Proposal Consultation Guide. Can I get a mover and a seconder to receive these, please? Councillor Berman and the Deputy Mayor. I will call the vote first to receive, and then I will ask if there's any items to be pulled. All in favor of receiving? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Are there any items to be pulled today, Council? I've got Deputy Mayor, Councillor McLeod, and Councillor Jeffrey. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. 6.1, 6.2.
Okay. Councillor McLeod?
6.4, please.
And Councillor Jeffrey.
All covered, 6.4 most particularly. Thank you.
Okay, well then we'll start off with the Deputy Mayor and items 6.1 and 6.2. Go ahead, Deputy.
Thank you. Just a brief comment. The 2 letters are very similar in nature and expressing similar concerns as it relates to the request that's been made by the owner of the current the golf course, Cranberry. I too share the concerns, but I don't want to prejudice an outcome because it is part of a development process, and it is within the planning rights of the owner to go through this process. But that said, I have sent correspondence to each of you, and I meant it seriously when I hope that perhaps over the course of summer, if you are traveling east, that you'll have an opportunity to take half an hour to an hour to visit the resort that I had mentioned that's gone through a similar transition. and the outcome that has taken shape there. At the same time, I would then say, or pivot slightly and just say that with these concerns, I think that it also raises an opportunity. And this would be one of those proactive opportunities where perhaps the municipality could get out front with a landowner who, in my opinion, is a landowner who has worked well with our community, continues to work well with the community. And perhaps we can shape a vision together as to how these particular areas could be utilized best for the community moving forward. So that's my comment. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you. And what I might do, Deputy Mayor, is ask Director of Planning, Glenn, to comment, because my understanding is these redesignation requests are being submitted in as part of our official plan update, and maybe he can provide some perspective on, because we're receiving a number of these. So perhaps Director Glenn could just give us some context of how these are being submitted and what the process will be as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In response to that, the request will be taken in as part of the official plan update program. There'll be an assessment of them for their appropriateness, fit within the community vision, and an assessment done by the consulting team, and then a recommendation back to through the program, through the official plan program, for inclusion into the OP or not inclusion into the OP. And if they don't get included in the OP, the landowners still have an option to pursue their own official plan amendment outside the official plan update process.
Good, thank you for that. Does anything rise out of that for you, Deputy Mayor? Okay, Councillor Jeffrey, I think you indicated you want to speak to this item as well.
Just to ensure the people that we're not giving direction or doing anything this evening, they're very much a part of the process going forward, and that we acknowledge we have their letters and that they will be included. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll move on then to 6.4. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. Just 1 second while I get my agenda back up. I apologize. This is, of course, 6.4 is related to Wasaga Beach's comments to the Environmental Registry Office. And as this council's representative on the NVCA, I can report that I have attended a meeting of Conservation Ontario last Monday, where the chairs and vice chairs and CAOs of all 36 conservation authorities discussed the province's posted guidelines regarding proposed regulation changes to the Conservation Authorities Act. And the Conservation Ontario Board approved a response to the guidelines and has provided it to the Environmental Registry Office. And as chair of the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority, I can also report that the Board of Directors at its meeting on Friday endorsed the comments created by Conservation Ontario. And I can also report as chair of the NVCA that I posted those endorsed comments on Friday afternoon to the ERO, including a letter I wrote to the brand new Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks, as directed by the NVCA Board of Directors, including the member from Wasaga Beach. The comments from Conservation Ontario, as endorsed by the NVCA, NVCA Board of Directors, are substantially different from those prepared by the town of Wasaga Beach, which is, of course, a direct downstream beneficiary of conservation work done elsewhere in the watershed. As the agenda for this meeting was already published on Friday afternoon, I will provide the comments to the ERO and the letter to the minister to be included in our next council consent agenda for your information.
Thank you for that update, Councillor, and perhaps you might just send copies to council in the interim in any event so that we can catch up on those. I'd appreciate that. Any other questions or comments arising out of that item, Councillor? Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So I really liked the approach and the opportunity that town of Wasaga Beach took. I'm not going to say one way or the other where I landed on the comments that they brought up, but I'm wondering if the town of Collingwood was taking such an opportunity, or if we had any further input we would like to be sending along. I know that we have Councillor McLeod there as chair, but that's not staff input. So I'm just wondering if there was something there.
I'll look first to Councillor McLeod, and then I'll go to CAO Skinner. Go ahead, Councillor.
I am not. I know that there have been conversations regarding the updated memoranda of understanding with 15 out of the 18 municipalities within the watershed. And I also understand none of them, that the 3 that are missing are include Collingwood and Amaranth, I think, and Oro Medonte, I think. Anyway, those conversations regarding memorandas of understanding, of which we do have one, which is expiring, I believe, in 2022. So those conversations are underway. And as I'm sure you read in the proposed guidelines for the regulations, each municipality within each watershed in all 36 conservation authorities across Ontario. So I think that's something like 98% of the 444 municipalities in Ontario are going to have a memoranda of understanding when it comes to non-core work. Core work, and that's sort of what's up for discussion right now. So if we want education for our kids that is provided by the NVCA in our schools, our municipality is going to have to pay for that and have for example, in addition to the stewardship work like Phragmites removal and stream restoration. So we, of course, are the downstream beneficiaries of the work that was done on the Piton Dam. I had the opportunity to go visit that last 2 Fridays ago to see how it's coming along. And there's work being done currently on how much the removal of the dam has lowered the water temperature in the Black Ash Creek that will make for better habitat for little fishies and critters, and make for better brook trout fishery. So there's much work to be done, and an awful lot of and not a lot of time in which to do it, and a lot of changes, which of course we don't even have the real regs. These are just the guidelines and the template. We could have the regs. I've been off the internet most of the day. I don't know if they came down today, but we are expecting them momentarily. So that's what I can say from my perspective. I'm sure CAO Skinner has things to say as well. And she has, of course, a unique perspective on conservation authorities.
Thank you, Councillor. CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have been watching this item pretty closely for a few years now, having come from the Conservation Authority ranks, and this had started when I was still in that role. I do really feel like where we are right now has been reviewed a number of times. There were a couple of rounds of input, and most recently, what's out for comment right now is the output from a new working group that was set up by the province and had conservation authorities as well as others in the working group. I haven't read in detail the background documents, although I did read in detail the Wasaga Beach comments that were put forward. And I think that we may wish to comment on the actual new regs because they'll include more details. And I'm not sure that our effort at this time will make any substantial differences beyond those that are have already been submitted. But I'm glad that we're following the issue, and thank you for the chance to address the question.
Thank you, CAO. Any follow-up, Councillor?
Oh, thank you very much.
All right. If there's any other questions or comments on those items, I intend to move on to item 7, which is the Standing Committee report. And we have the Standing Committee report of Development and Operations Services of June 14, 2021. And the resolution at 7.1.1 reads as follows. The council received the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee report from its meeting held June 14, 2021, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. P 2021-16, 308 7th Street Site Plan Control Minor Adjustment for a Detached Garage. And the recommendation is to approve the processing of the proposed attached accessory building as a minor adjustment to a site plan control agreement. P 2021-17, radio communications tower proposals, 25 Sanford Fleming Drive and 28806 line. And the recommendation is that concurrence for the radio communications tower proposed at 25 Sanford Fleming Drive and a non-concurrence for the radio telecommunications tower and proposed for 28806 line be provided to the Industry, Science and Economic Development Canada. P 2021-12 temporary traffic calming. The recommendation is that, to approve the transfer of up to $110,000 from the traffic calming capital budget to the Public Works operating budget to support the installation of temporary traffic calming infrastructure. I'm going to sever from that the infrastructure required for the Cameron Street Public School. And CCI is the source of Councillor Jeffrey's conflict. So we'll pull that out for this vote. The next item is general consent agenda, and the recommendation is to receive the general consent agenda and approve motion to refer requests for redesignation through the official plan update be received and referred back to the Director of Planning for appropriate action as outlined in staff report P 2020-2 through the official plan update process as amended. My belief is that all of these votes were unanimous. So I will have it moved by Chair Hamlin and seconded by Vice Chair Jeffrey. And unless there are items that people want to pull for a change in the direction of the recommendations, I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. I'm now going to bring back the traffic calming. So the recommendation of PW 2021-12 temporary traffic calming, the recommendation to approve the transfer of up to $110,000 for the traffic calming capital budget, or from the capital budget to the Public Works operating budget to support the installation of temporary traffic calming infrastructure. I'm going to call the vote relative the Cameron Street Public School and CCI infrastructure. Councillor Jeffrey has left the meeting. I'm sure the minutes will reflect that. So I will call the vote. Again, it's moved by Chair Hamlin and seconded by not seconded. I'll need a seconder for that, please. Somebody from the committee. I'll count Councillor Comey. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And we can bring back Councillor Jeffrey, please. And this brings us to item 8, motions. And the first motion is 8.1. It's Councillor McLeod's motion relative relief of development charge fees for 2023 Oak Street. Go ahead, Councillor McLeod.
Sorry, just back to item 7.1 with regarding the traffic calming. I have a question about that. Although I feel as though the vote was taken without, that report has been amended, has it not, by our staff?
I will look through to staff to respond to that. Director Slama?
Worship, yes, the report was amended to provide some information to council on procurement questions that were raised at the committee. Manager Bellick is present if you would like an explanation on it.
If that's not out of order, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
So I'm pretty mindful of the learnings that we had from the judicial inquiry regarding procurement, and I just want to be absolutely sure that that we don't go down the same path of previous councils with sole sourcing and so on. And so I just want to be sure that that we have assurances from staff that we are within our procurement rules regarding this report.
I think you're referring to the idea that we might proceed with one test pilot area, and that brought the budget down to a different level of scrutiny. So with that being said, I'll pass it over to Director Slama or Manager Bellick, whoever wants to take that question, please.
I can speak to this.
Manager Bellick.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Manager Bellick.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor. So there were 2 issues. One was the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, which sets limits on procurement values and the amount of versus the amount of time you have to advertise the request for quote. We are under that threshold, so we are at liberty to choose whatever posting time we want. And then the other was the value with respect to whether it's an open market or an invitational request for quotation. So we are above the threshold. So we are doing an open market bid. So we are, and I've confirmed this with our procurement officer. So we're within the bylaw, within all the provisions in the bylaw.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. While I have you, if I may, if I'm understanding this correctly, if everything goes absolutely according to plan and things get delivered when they're supposed to and not 6 months later like my fridge, these things are going to be in place for 4 weeks in September and 2 weeks in October?
Our winter control policy technically states that we start monitoring roads for snowfall October 1st. So, that's an indicator that, we could potentially get snow in October 1st. So I think we'll have to really watch the weather. I think we will try and keep them on the roads as long as possible. But we can't predict the weather, and there's always the potential in October for snow. It's pretty rare, but we'll have to keep an eye out and keep an eye out for the winter weather.
So as a follow-up, if we are monitoring for snow as of October the 1st, these come out of the school zones as of October 1st? Or
I think they could potentially come out October 1st, yes.
Okay, so
if we're having a warm fall, and it's we do get those 15 degree October days, I think we can leave them out. But if we're having an unusually cold fall, then I think we would err on the side of caution to take them out. But I think it's the intention to leave them as long as possible.
And then in the spring, thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, and in the spring, they will be replaced as of May the 15th, May the 1st, April 10th. What do we know?
I believe it would be, I would have to verify that. It would be around May 1st. The Public Works Department is very busy in the spring with street sweeping. And so that would probably take precedence. So it would be May or June when they would be going back in.
Possibly June. Okay. And do they stay for the entire summer, or do they come out when school ends?
No, we could leave them out for the entire summer. Yes.
Okay. Great. And just a final question. I'm curious to know about the placement in the report about where some of these things are going, because I'm thinking there's a couple of schools that are on corners, and for example, Collingwood Collegiate, but there was no mention of the speed hump or not humps, whatever they're being called, for Hurontario Street. And I'm curious to know about why not. And also on the backside of Connaught, there's like an outlet from that school, not on Peel, but on the street that runs parallel to, or perpendicular to Peel. There's no suggestion of any of these happening on that street either. And I'm just curious to know, most particularly about CCI and why Hurontario, because it seems to me there's an awful lot of kids going to the candy store across the street, which causes some concerns.
Manager Valley.
So through Mayor Saunderson to Councillor McLeod, staff didn't feel it appropriate to be putting traffic calming on Hurontario, given it's an arterial road. We'd be concerned about it slowing traffic down too much that it starts to cause congestion. That was the reason. As for Connaught, are you referring to? Oh, I guess that's Erie Street.
Yes, thank you, Erie Street.
I guess it's just a matter of preference. When we went and visited all the sites, and we thought that just Peel Street was the most appropriate. But if it's council's desire to add them on to Erie Street, we certainly can do that.
I'm not suggesting it's my desire. I was just curious to know, because I knew you were thorough and I knew you were out there. So I was wondering how the conclusion got made on that particular street.
Yeah, I think through the mayor, I think the idea was if the school fronted onto the side street, we would put it onto the side street. If it didn't front onto the street, then we didn't. But it's not a scientific approach. So that was kind of our rationale.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and with the answers that I've been given by Manager Bellick, I'm confident about our procurement policy, and I'm happy to support this.
Good. And we have done the vote. So I guess in the future, if there are questions you want to have addressed before we do call the vote, just ask and I will sever that item as well and pull it out so that you can get your answers to your questions before we have done the vote. So
Sorry, I felt like you severed it for conversation rather than just for what happened. I apologize.
no, not a worry. Deputy Mayor, you had your card up, and then Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Just a very brief comment, and that is that I appreciate that these are temporary measures, and I hope that we will return and have a conversation about how we make more permanent, long-term traffic calming solutions, specifically within the areas that we've just discussed, Finley, Peel, and the school areas. I am confident that the assets that we are purchasing will have long-term shelf life, in the sense that they are assets that we can move around the community, so that when we go to maybe permanently replace them, as neighboring municipalities have. I was down on Klondike Beach Road, for example, and they have installed permanent humps in that area for traffic calming. That we'll be able to continue to use these. So I want taxpayers to know that we're being proactive in creating temporary solutions with a look to the future, but at the same time, those temporary solutions do have, in my opinion, a long-term shelf life. As the community continues to grow, we'll be able to mobilize and use them in other places in the community, because quite frankly, there are no shortage of places that they can be used. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I do apologize, because I know that the vote has been taken, and I would not change my vote. However, the question that Councillor MacLeod asked, when the features would be removed for winter and reinstalled for spring, got me to thinking that if we are removing them at the earliest possible date in October and putting them back in at the latest possible date in 2022, so closer to June, so then our poor students and their parents will only have had the benefit for 2 months of these traffic calming measures during the school year. And so I just want to express the hope that Public Works will consider upping the priority of reinstalling these measures in the spring as soon as possible, after threat of snow has passed, and not the lowest priority in the spring of the year. Anyway, just a comment. I can't help myself. I had to say it.
We've got that on record. I think they'll take it into consideration. Certainly, there was an indication that some of that would depend on the weather forecast, I guess, in the spring. If we are prepared to have sand on the shoulders for longer for the cyclist gang, then that's the trade-off there. So staff will certainly take that comment into consideration. And if there's no other questions or comments on this item, then we'll move on to item 8.1. And Councillor MacLeod, it's your motion, so you're up.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank Deputy Clerk Dahl for her help creating this. Well, she actually created the motion. You council members should also be grateful to her because I was in the process of writing this motion, and that was to come to the same effect, but it had way more whereases and is much, much longer. So you can be counting your lucky stars that Deputy Clerk Dahl is as efficient as she is. A would-be resident came to us asking for this to be considered, and so I think we should consider it. And I will clarify that my understanding of this matter has changed after a very helpful conversation with the treasurer, which is that the building permit was, just to clarify from the conversation we had during that deputation, the building permit was applied for 7 weeks after the expiry of the credit connected to the demolition permit, which means that the gap between the expiry of the demolition permit and the issuance of the permits is actually more than 6 months. And from the 5-year deadline, The 5 years is when the demolition permit is given and to when the building permit is issued, not to when the application is made for the building permit. And that's what I have to say about this motion. Do you need me to read it in, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, if you would, please. Yeah.
Thank you. I should have done that first. Whereas bylaw number 2019-054 establishes development charges for the corporation of the town of Collingwood, and whereas section 11 subsection 1 of the bylaw provides the ability to reduce or apply a credit to the amount of development charges applied to a redevelopment where the existing structure has been demolished and a building permit for the redevelopment is issued within 5 years of the date of the issuance of a permit for the demolition of any building or structure on the same lands. And whereas section 15 of the bylaw provides the ability to appeal the requirements of the bylaw, and the property owner of 223 Oak Street requests council waive the applicable development charges as the 5-year period has lapsed due to unforeseen delays caused due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, be it resolved, the council of the town of Collingwood authorize the waiving of fees specific to the municipal development charges in the amount of $45,251 for the redevelopment of 223 Oak Street, Collingwood.
All right, and I'll look for a seconder to get it on the floor, please. Councillor Jeffrey, and you want to speak to it now, Councillor McLeod, or?
I just did.
I just did, okay.
You
did it or you've confused me already. No, I understand.
Sorry.
All right, so I'll look for comments from the floor then. Council, go ahead. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, perhaps to staff for clarification. From the public perspective, if I'm watching tonight for the first time, we're having a motion that's being debated on the waiving of $45,000 in reference to a deputation that was made to council last week. That's fine. But there's no context in terms of what staff have done in terms of a recommendation or the backdrop. So I'd like to do one of two things. One, either refer it to staff and have them come back with a clear recommendation, or two, if there's new information, provide that information this evening as it relates to what we're being asked to vote on. My preference would be number one, to be quite frank.
Okay, I will look to Treasurer Quinlan. I know when the deputation was made, she had some context to provide to it, and I don't know, Treasurer Quinlan, if you're prepared to address it now, or you'd prefer to come back at the next meeting with a report.
I do think I can share a little bit of information, and if you still see fit, we could do an additional staff report, but I can just add a few items if that's okay through you, your worship.
So that would be fine. Go ahead, please, Treasurer.
So I think we did provide some background, just and I thank you, Councillor McLeod, for just clarifying on the actual expiration of the exemption period. So it does go from the date that the demolition permit is issued to the date that the actual building permit itself is issued. So the difference between those dates was October 22nd, 2020, and don't quote me, but I believe it was May 16th, 2021. So it is a little bit greater than 6 months. So when the resident did bring forward the timeline, he explained that he had put his building permit application in December. So that's a good point of clarity. I do think, from staff's perspective, we did say that, or I shared with members of council that our position is that generally we would not look to waive these types of charges, largely because it sets a precedent. The 5 years is in place to try and coincide with the timing of each time we have to do an updated background study. Sorry, I was trying to think of how to word that. So every 5 years, according to the Development Charge Act, staff is required to issue a new background study. So the point of that 5 years was more or less to try and capture any time the population changes. We're able to capture that period when vacant lots exist. I think the other piece that council could consider is that the reason the 5-year timeline is in place from staff's perspective is to try and force people or encourage people, I guess is a better word, to rebuild more quickly rather than having empty vacant lots around for a great amount of time. I will say, however, I understand that this pandemic is an unusual situation. So it is within council's purview to extend the exemption deadline and essentially create that or state that it's not appropriate for the DC to be charged in this particular situation. And maybe just to share that there is only one other property that would be in this particular situation right now, that in terms of applying during the pandemic and possibly could come forward at some point as well, although we have not heard anything. So I think that may alleviate some pressure from members of council in terms of making that decision. And I'll also just share that on average, we're not the only municipality. Certainly, it is 5 years is sort of the average timeline that you'll see in most municipalities, DC bylaws. And when we spoke to our DC consultants at Hempson, they did share that there are some that have greater periods, but within the area, there was only one other municipality that had greater than 5 years, and I believe it was set at 7. So it's certainly the general policy of municipalities in the area within that 5 years. I don't know if that gives you enough.
That's helpful. Deputy Mayor, follow up.
Thank you. It is helpful, and I appreciate the comments of the treasurer. I think what I'm concerned about is precedent setting. And so if I heard the treasurer correctly, we have the possibility of one other, but it doesn't appear that we've got a pipeline of, that's perhaps a bad use or a bad pun these days, but it doesn't sound like we've got a pipeline of these coming down to deal with. Maybe the last question I've got, and it's a legal question, and in no way did the deputant indicate this, so I'm not suggesting it, but it is to protect the taxpayer, and that is, if council were to waive these fees, can it be done in such a manner that the fees would be payable if the property was flipped within a period of time? The applicant has told us that this is a primary residence. I have no reason to doubt that, but to protect the taxpayer, I think it is reasonable to suggest that if the house was sold within a year or 18 months, I would consider that a flip, and therefore maybe the DC charges should be paid at that time.
Treasurer Quinlan.
Through you, Your Worship. To be honest, I don't know the answer to that question in terms of legally, but I could ask our counsel, but I honestly, I'm not really sure.
Okay, I'm going to go around the table for other comments, and then Deputy Mayor, if you have a follow-up to that or any request, we'll deal with it then. I've got Councillor Hamlin, Councillor Doherty, and then Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. And I guess this my question is through you, Mr. Mayor, to Treasurer Quinlan. The whereas clause in the motion refers to a section of our development charges bylaw, and it says that you get this exemption from having to pay if the new building permit from the site where the building was demolished is issued within 5 years of the date of the issuance of the demo permit. Is that correct, how that's said there? Like the building permit actually has to be issued as opposed to applied for?
Treasurer?
Through you, Your Worship, yes. It's the 5 years starts on the date of the issuance of the demolition permit, and it ends on the issuance of a building permit.
Because the way I read this then is that their deadline for getting a permit issued is it October 22/20 for getting a building permit. So anyone would have thought to have left at least 6 months to get a building permit. You don't just walk in and throw your plans down and they give them a stamp. So it seems to me like they should have been applying, 6 months before that. And they didn't. It seems to me it's like a lot at a time. Am I wrong thinking this?
I'm going to look to our planning staff. I don't know if we have CBO Miller available who could speak about issuance of building permits and the timeline involved for that.
If I may, Your Worship, I
Yeah.
don't believe CBO Miller is on this evening, but
Okay.
I don't, and I'm sorry, but I can't actually speak to the amount of time. I would say that definitely the fact is in this case that the application was made after the deadline. So really, I suppose, likely, what you would expect is at least, even if it was 6 weeks before the deadline or something along those lines, there might be some, some leverage, or I guess I can't think of the right word, but in this particular instance, I'm not sure it necessarily matters in the fact that, at the end of the day, the application was made afterwards. So whether, it takes 6 months or 4 months, I would think it takes quite some time for sure to get through one.
Thank you.
Councillor Hamlin.
Yeah, I'll just have a brief comment. I too would like a staff report on this. If there is, I am also very worried about a precedent. I have had my ear, chewed off about, charges shouldn't apply for this kind of development or that kind of development. And I think that if we're going to make an exemption, and the reason is because of the difficulties experienced by everyone during COVID, then I would like a staff report that says that, so that, we don't have someone coming next year who's applied after the time their permit should have been issued already. Or if staff doesn't think this is a good idea, I also would like to see that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty, and then Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. Yeah, I would be inclined to agree with Councillor Hamlin that I also would like to see a staff report. Although understandably the process of making application for a building permit may have been extended because of COVID. COVID has not been with us for 5 years. So I'm not completely sympathetic on that matter. I guess the other thing is we consider the location and knowing that most of the homes in that area are of a value of $1 million or more. The development charge payment is not a hardship for the proponent, I wouldn't think. And I certainly would not want to establish a precedent in particular on a matter such as this one. If it were an exceptional case, say for the construction of rental housing or affordable housing or some such, I might have an open ear, but in this case, I just think we're going down a slippery slope. And well, I guess I've expressed my opinion, but I still would stand to be corrected by staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So really ditto. I agree with the last 3 speakers, and I'm happy to second when you're ready for a referral to staff. The only different thought that came to my mind in terms of COVID, we never waived any fees for anyone else. Or recommended it through our economic recovery team. What we did was waive penalty and interest. And if there was a way, if the proponent did need assistance with cash flow in terms of the $45,000, if it wasn't precedent setting, you might consider something like giving them 5 years, whatever, 99,000 a year over 5 years. But I would like to hear, I think it has to come from staff. I don't think council should get into the business of putting ourselves in this position and with potential for precedence. So that's it.
Thank you for that. Council, we have got a request, I think, for referral. I'll get the deputy mayor and then we'll get a seconder and get it on the table. And then CAO Skinner, I saw your card, so I will come back to you.
Thank you. I guess that I would like to table a referral, and if appropriate, and perhaps the CAO and the treasurer can respond, that it would come back through development operations July the 12th. and then come through to council, if that makes sense. And I think that the questions were all captured. Perhaps it's already something that's reflected in our DC bylaw, but I would like the question specifically answered as it relates to whether we can put a provision in place if a property is flipped within a period of time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll look to CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have a specific answer to the question about what can happen with development charges if the property is sold. But I would be quite surprised if we wrote a staff report and the recommendation was to waive the fees. The building department has been working through COVID on the regular timelines. And while there is flexibility for council to make a decision as the treasurer had set out, given the precedent and some of the things that have been raised, I would expect that the staff recommendation will be to apply the fees fairly and transparently to this and other properties that have been vacant for longer than the 5-year requirement in the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So we've got the motion to refer on the floor. Councillor Jeffrey has offered to second it. And we've had good discussion, and I will call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried. And I guess I'll just look to CAO Skinner to make sure that the timeline of July 12 is feasible.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe that Treasurer Quinlan is able to produce for that timeline, and we will do so. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. And that brings us then to item 8.2, which is the town-wide speed limit options. You'll recall that the last meeting we went through and we were putting options on the table. So there's on the table are option 1, option 2, option 3, and a hybrid of option 1 and option 4. And so I think the simplest way to proceed through this is to deal with each option. And if it's defeated, we'll move on to the next option until we have a successful option. And so option 1 is that council requests consultation commence with the community, such as through engage Collingwood to confirm the community's desires with respect to speed limits in the town of Collingwood, and that Collingwood retain a consultant request to undertake a study incorporating the public feedback and utilizing the road safety management process as outlined in the US Highway Safety Manual to determine where speed limit reductions or other safety improvements are warranted, and provide a list of projects that would reduce crash frequency on the town road network, including the items identified in the Public Works memo dated June 21, 2021 for option 4. Can I get a mover and a seconder to put this on the floor, please? Councillor Hamlin and Councillor Doherty. Are there any questions or comments before I call the vote? Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I was wondering if somebody could make crystal clear for me the difference between option 1 and the hybrid option 1 and 4, please.
I will look to Director Slama. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Worship. So the difference between option 1 and the hybrid 1 and 4, they are very similar. Both include the component of community consultation, which was item 1 that we presented in our memo. And the option 1 that you have in front of you tonight is the full-fledged option 4 from the last memo. And then the hybrid, when we're looking at utilizing the road safety management process, we would be concentrating on the hotspot areas that were identified in the report presented to the Collingwood Police Services Board. So rather than the whole town, we would concentrate on those hotspot areas.
Follow-up, Councillor?
No, thank you very much. I could not discern myself, so that helped. Thank you.
All right.
Can I just clarify that, Mr. Mayor, because I was the one who put that on the table.
The option 1 and 4 hybrid.
Yeah, it's actually option, it should be option 2 and 4, like the option 2 above, which is just, the intent was to have that we just asked staff to proceed with the costing and move to 40 km/h on our local and collector roads, but to do more study on the hotspots that the OPP identified on our arterial roads. So that was the intent.
All right, so that changes the final one, which when we come to, if we get there, is option 2 and option 4, not option 1. Are there any questions or comments then on option 1 before we call the vote? Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just as we proceed, I don't know how we do, but I would appreciate recorded votes as we go along.
And you just request a recorded vote for each one.
Yeah, please. Okay, so if we're about to vote on this one, recorded vote, please.
All right. Any other questions or comments on option 1, Council? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. I admit I'm starting to get confused here. I'm sorry. I am very supportive of a townwide 40 kilometer speed limit. But I do believe that we owe it to the public as a courtesy to ask them for their input on as broad a platform as we can. So engage Collingwood. And the second thing, and none of this really addresses my concern, but we're calling for a consultant. We're referencing the U.S. Highway Safety Manual. I'm just not sure how much consulting we need in that. There are, to my most recent count, there's 8 municipalities in Ontario who have already taken advantage of Bill 65 and reduced their speed limits to 40. We have the learning of all of these municipalities. And so it seems to me that, you know, there are complications, there are things to consider that we might not have considered. As an example, you reduce the speed limit across the community to 40 kilometers an hour. Suddenly you're impacting on the schedule for your buses. I mean, it just makes sense. Things that we would never consider. So I agree that there are things that need to be considered and that staff are in the best position as our specialists to do a literature review and to come forward with a recommendation. But I'm just not sure we need to go out and do another full-blown study unless I'm misinterpreting what we mean here by a study.
Thank you.
That's probably not even helpful, but I'm really confused. I'm sorry.
Director Slama, I'll look to you first to talk about the need for a study.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So I think that Councillor Doherty's comments are relevant to this option, because in this option we are looking at that combination of the public consultation, and then doing a very in-depth review of road safety. So I think Councillor Doherty's words are along the lines of what we had presented in option 3, which is also the option 3 in front of you tonight, which is staff completing, what we would still complete some safety studies, but we would also, staff would be working to complete the research on other municipalities, complete some research on, you know, regulations and other things that have been implemented, and then use that to guide our decisions for Collingwood.
Follow up, Councillor.
Yes, thank you. So I guess what I'd like to vote for isn't there yet. because I, in that case, would be supportive of option 3, but I would like to add that I would like to complete a community consultation in advance of a further staff study and report.
What we'll do, Councillor, when we get to option 3 is you can put an amendment on the floor dealing with that one at that time.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Councillor Hamlin.
There we go. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you're good.
I'm good. Okay. You know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and as Councillor Doherty mentioned, it was 4 years ago the province gave the authority to municipalities to implement speed limits in their communities of less than 50 kilometers an hour. And since that time, municipalities one by one have been implementing 40 kilometers an hour mainly. Some have gone to certain areas with 30, but by and large, the municipalities are moving to 40. Last month, we heard from the consultant who did our traffic calming study, and he mentioned that the traffic calming tools, they're acting to slow traffic. And the reason we want to slow traffic, and he had, you know, all the numbers, and, you know, I'm not going to say them all again, but clearly slower traffic provides fewer deaths, less accidents, less injuries. So since that time, I've been reading one of our town's own reports that was done in 2017. It's called Active Transportation Framework. And I went back to it this morning, and it has a statement in there in a highlighted box for those following along. Anyway, I'm just going to read you a sentence. It says, the World Health Organization's World Report on Road Traffic Injury Prevention, done in 2004, states, speed has been identified as a key risk factor in road traffic injuries, influencing both the risk of a road crash as well as the severity of the injuries that result from crashes. And then our Active Transportation Framework study goes on to say, it is obvious that collision severity is reduced with speed reductions. However, street safety is more importantly improved by reduced motor vehicle speeds, which allow for increased response times and reduced stopping distances, which in turn improve collision avoidance altogether. And then they have a little table, and they show if you reduce speeds by, they were doing it in miles per hour, and then they converted it to 9.7 kilometers per hour. So in other words, 50 to 40. The reduction in collisions is 42%. So, and then our own staff report that was provided last week says studies also show that setting limits lower than engineering recommendations can produce a statistically significant decrease in fatal and injury crashes and property damage only crashes. So, you know, we have the province and 3 studies. So I think we studied this. I think we're ready. I think that there are issues, and our staff report from last week says in 2 of their concerns were enforcement related. You know, maybe people won't drive slower. And I'll say that when the province introduced the right for municipalities to lower their speed limits from 50 kilometers an hour, they gave them another tool. And at that time, they said, you can also bring in automatic speed enforcement systems or red light camera systems. Somebody thought about this. And we know recently we had a report from our staff on the red light camera systems, and there's some problems with it. I'll say technical issues and backlog issues. And I know we're waiting for more information on when this is the kind of thing we can move forward using as a community. But I don't think we need to wait for that, because I read the Guelph, one of our residents sent me the Guelph staff report. They're also considering maybe even, well, very soon, reducing to 40 kilometers an hour. And they said what they're going to do is it takes, 5 to 10 years. They're going to lower their speed limits and monitor the traffic speed limit reductions to see how effective it is. So we can do that. I just think, us moving to 40, it's also going to be, I think what's going to happen over time as all the communities start to move to 40, that's what's going to be expected. And we're seeing it now as people realize that they have this ability, and as their neighbor does it, their municipality does it, it's going to be the common thing to do. And I don't know why we have to study this or think about it. I'm prepared to say full speed ahead. Let's just get some signs up. Another resident sent me some lovely photos he took from his TV screen watching the Tour de France over the last couple of days. And some of these smaller communities in France, what they've done is instead of having signs everywhere, in certain places, they actually paint on the road with lime paint big circles, and they put 40 inside it to remind drivers the speed limit. And I'll send some of those photos along to our staff after the meeting. So,
so Councillor, we're dealing with option one. I take it you're not in favor of option one. We're going to go through other options. So
I know, but I thought I'll just get my remarks out and then I cannot say anything for the other ones. I only have one more thing to say, actually. So I'm going to say I'm not in favor of one. I am in favor of two. I think that it's a smart thing to do. I know we could reach out to our community. I know I've received tons of emails from people saying, please just do this. I don't know, obviously, what everyone else has received. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Deputy Mayor, you had your card up.
Thank you. I just, because we were on number one and there were the various options, and the wording is only within number two, I just wanted to be clear, and I'm supportive when I ask this question through to Councillor Hamlin, that the term town-wide is not, we're not talking town-wide. We are talking about interior and collector only. Thank you.
That's right. Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
think the arterial roads need special attention. Thanks.
All right. Got good discussion on option one. There's been a request for a recorded vote, so I will pass it to Deputy Clerk Dahl.
Thank you, Your Worship. So a recorded vote has been called. All those in favor, please raise your yes card. All those opposed, please raise your no card. And the motion is defeated.
Thank you. And that brings us then to option two. The council requests a staff report to include the cost to install the required signage to reduce speed limits to 40 kilometers on all local and collector roads, and report back at the October Development and Operations Standing Committee meeting. And further, that the report include the signage requirements as per HTA, the Highway Traffic Act, locations of signs, a summary of other municipalities that have implemented similar reductions, and how this change would be communicated to the public. Can I get a mover and a seconder for option two, please? Councillor Comey and Councillor Hamlin. Questions or comments, Council? Councillor Comey.
Well, I've now missed my family pictures, but that's all right. I'll figure out a way to get a 14-year-old to stand with me later. But I will say, listen, I think option two meets us at a very happy place, and I won't take too long to say it. Councillor Doherty had concerns about engaging the public. I'd like to share this idea that adopting a policy that speaks to slowing our residential traffic and making it safer is interwoven into the other policies and the United Nations conferences that this council is supporting, our cycling master plan, the fact we didn't use Engage Collingwood to just put these special things around our schools. We didn't go to Engage Collingwood with our crossing guard study. So it's just inherent to who, in my opinion, we're saying we are to our community. I very much tie it to our declaration of a climate emergency. It is a prioritizing of cyclist and pedestrian safety. So I don't, combined with the abundance of emails that have been shared with all of council, not quick copy paste emails, individual stories and accounts. So to me, I don't have any sort of concern that I haven't heard from constituents that this is sort of out of nowhere and no one would see this coming. So I'm comfortable with that. If anyone was curious, Habitats in Towns, one of their prior lectures literally was on this topic, because as Councillor Hamlin said, that it's actually 30 kilometers that our World Health Organization is calling for. So I think we've had and heard from our public plenty on this. They're not looking forward to hearing their council has added a line item to a budget for a consultant, which I just want to quickly remind everybody means our staff then, if it's approved, has to prepare that RFP package, put it out to bid, procurement has to review it, it has to be awarded, the consultant has to come back to us, we have to accept their recommendations, maybe those recommendations become a line item in the next year's budget, and on it goes. So option 2, it gives our staff an opportunity to still come back to us, put their thoughts, we look forward to hearing them, and perhaps any tweaks or adjustments could be made at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Comey. Councillor McLeod.
Just a point of clarification, does this option commit us to 40, or does this option merely ask for a staff report looking at how expensive it will be to go to 40?
I will look to Director Slama on that, please.
Thank you, Worship. So it does speak to a staff report that would present the cost to council. So a bit of a report that would look at the locations, speak to some elements of what we have researched from other municipalities doing, and then it would also summarize the costs, and then that would be coming forward to council for their decision on implementation.
Follow up, Councillor McLeod.
And if I may, Your Worship,
yeah.
Manager Velick did mention to me on the side that I was incorrect when I was speaking of option 3 earlier. So option 2 does talk about our staff completing the review, whereas option 3 does mention retaining a consultant. This could be through our engineering roster, but we would look to see if we felt any of the engineers on our roster had the skill and the knowledge to complete that review. So sorry, my apologies, a correction on that.
Thank you, Director. Follow up, Councillor McLeod.
Yeah, so from what I'm hearing here is that this is not decision day. This is, and anyone who is saying that this is the day we're deciding to go to 40, this option is not bibbity bobbity boo, we're going to 40. This is, we're studying how much it would cost to go to 40. And someday in the future, we may consider that when the report comes back. That's my understanding. Am I correct?
Director Slama?
I would say yes, you are correct.
Thank you.
All right, I've got Councillor Dory, then the Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. Thank you for Director Slama for that clarification, because as I was reviewing option 2 again and listening to the other comments, I had a funny feeling that you were referring to option 2 when you said that would be the option that I would like. So if that's the case, Your Worship, I would like to propose an amendment to option 2. Okay. And that would be to, as a courtesy to our entire population, to ask for a consultation via Engage Collingwood on the notion of reducing the speed limit townwide.
All right, I got your amendment and I will come back to that. And I'll go next, unless you have further comments, to the Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Jeffrey. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I would just like to lend my support to option number 2 in the context that if I was given the opportunity to vote and proceed with option 2 at 40 kilometers this evening, I would do so. I share the comments of both Councillor Hamlin and Councillor Comey that although the consultation may not have done locally, it has been done elsewhere. And I look back at other watershed moments. Some of the watershed moments that were referenced, I think Councillor Hamlin made reference last week to drinking and driving. I certainly remember the conversations. I think it was either Mayor Geddes or Mayor Carrier that dealt with the issue of the introduction of the smoking bylaw. And we look back at watershed moments like that today, and we think that it's almost unfathomable that drinking and driving was an accepted act in some circles. And in fact, I remember growing up as a kid, people affectionately referring to, the taverns out in Woolwich and Wellesley Township, et cetera, outside of Waterloo. And one of the reasons those taverns were so successful is because people did drink and drive at that time. Many of those taverns aren't there today. I think it would be unthinkable for people to walk into a theater today or to an arena and to expect that they could light up a cigarette. And yet many of the industry and businesses at the time that threatened that their doors would shutter and close permanently forever, in fact, have flourished as a result of not having smoking. And I stand to be corrected, but when I read the data and the supporting documentations that have been put in place by previous councils and the policies that are here and already enacted, I think that there's enough supporting evidence that this is a really, really good policy. There have been too many misses, in my opinion, in the past. I think this council is very well versed in the thoughts of Mr. Voigt in his current capacity as a professional planner in the private sector, and is a current member of our Affordable Housing Task Force. Some may not recall, though, that at one point he was actually a staff member with the town of Collingwood. And for all of the good work that he was able to accomplish, I can certainly attest to all of the great work that never went anywhere because we didn't have the courage and the fortitude to implement many of the progressive policies that he had the courage to put forward. And I'm sure if I went to my office, I could dig out some of those reports. And I think of some of the misses in terms of alternative parking, the parquet in our downtown, all really, really progressive things. And in particular, I remember a huge missed opportunity. He introduced our community to two individuals. One of them was from the United States, a gentleman by the name of Dan Burden. And he represents a think tank called Walkable Communities. And the other one, the name escapes me, but he's with ABCD out of Australia. I think that's what it is. And we were fortunate as a community of 20,000 people to have these two individuals come and present at that time. And again, some of the things that they presented were light years ahead. And they talked about how just subtle fundamental changes had these long-lasting implications. And the takeaways from Dan Burden in particular, as it related to the traffic and then the walkable communities, was that a lot of our conversation has been focused on safety, and that should be number one. So if we've got a triangle, safety should be up here. But when you start to work your way down the triangle and you get deeper into the bars, the layers, the real benefits sort of come through. So safety may be number one. I'm just spitballing. Safety number one. Two might be the environment. But the further you get down, you get into things like the economy and the fact that if you slow people down, if you get people out of their cars, if you find ways to encourage people to safely take their bike from, the corner of Poplar and High downtown, that you actually start to see an economy emerge simply because you've got a safer, more progressive community. And I think that this dovetails into so many of the really good things that we're already doing, whether it be, simple things like new bike racks beside the Eddie Bush Arena, the new bike shelter that's going in over by the terminal at Pine and Second, et cetera. And they're all part of the layer. They're all part of the puzzle in that respect. And the last comment I would just make is that I do think that there are times when public consultation is important. And I think that, for example, when you're perhaps looking at a new facility or something, you want to understand that the uses maybe complement the various organizations within the community, that you're getting a broad understanding that, from an artistic perspective, from an accessibility perspective, that, all of the boxes are ticked off. But we're elected to make decisions. And I think that this is one of those watershed moments where this is a decision where there will be people who will be, quite frankly, angry that we're making this decision. Fair enough. There were people who were angry when municipality after municipality after municipality implemented smoking bylaws. But I think long term, when we are long and gone, and I don't mean from this earth, but from this council, people will look back and say that this was one of those progressive decisions that made this community better. And so therefore, I'd like to lend my support to Councillor Hamlin, Councillor Comey. I hope that everyone else would at least consider doing so. And as I stated from the outset, if I was given the opportunity to make the vote tonight to move forward with 40K, I would feel comfortable doing so tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So I was around for smoking and pesticides and a lot of those things, and came out on the right side and actually forced the province into some decisions they should have made a lot sooner. So I, like Councillor McLeod, can come to the conclusion that option 2 isn't a decision tonight. It's a decision to get information to make a decision. And I like Councillor Doherty's amendment because, unlike the deputy mayor, I have heard from people who aren't happy about it. And I committed to representing everybody, and I'd like to hear from everybody before I make this decision. So I will support Councillor Doherty's amendment. And then lastly, the word consultant, it's a red herring, because if the consultant doesn't do it, staff are going to do it, and there's a cost to that. And we've already been told every time we take up something like that, something on that massive list gets displaced. So there's a cost to this, and I would want all my constituents to understand that while it may not be a line item to a consultant, I can assure you it's a line item of staff time and preparatory work, and it's just probably a matter of council's choice as to where they want that cost to come from. So those are my comments. Thank you.
I guess just to tug on that thread, I'll look to staff. What would the timeline be for that type of work and legwork on this initiative? Director Slama.
Through you, or I guess to answer your question. So we have identified that we would provide a report back in October for this alternative, option 2. I think Councillor Jeffrey does raise a good point. Our engineering group is busy. We do have priorities that have been identified in our operational plan. And, setting this as a priority for October will inevitably have to, move something else a little bit further down our timeline.
Any follow-up? Yep, go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So if option 2 is carried, then I would want that to be part of the report so that council have a total understanding and the constituents understand which of their priorities is going to be bumped to facilitate that time.
I'll look to Director Slama. If that is the case, do you require active direction on that, or can you include that in the report?
Thank you, Worship. I'm just considering I think like staff will need to dedicate time to this report. And I kind of talked about this with Manager Velick, but we didn't speak specifically on, how projects that he's working on now, how any of those might be moved or delayed. And I don't know if Manager Velick, if you have any comments, if you can answer the question, or I see CA Skinner's got her card up.
Yeah, go ahead, Manager Velick, and then I'll go to the CAO.
I just, through Mayor Saunderson, I think I'd just like clarification. So staff will prepare this report for October. And if I'm correct, Councillor Jeffrey is asking for, as part of that report, the projects that will be deferred in writing that report. I'm not quite clear.
Okay, I'll look to Councillor Jeffrey just to clarify that.
Thank you, Mayor Saunders. So it would be were. I would like to know, well, yes, I want to have a good idea as to what's being set aside to bring up new priorities like this. And if it's easier in the back end just to assess the cost, staff's cost and time to do this, so that residents can have the understanding that it does take time. I just want us to have a full understanding of what we're doing and we don't keep moving priorities around. That's it.
Thank you. Maybe I'll look to CAO Skinner to comment on that, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think this is something that the council and staff actually have been struggling with for a while. And what we really want to do is have truly clear, open communication about council's priorities and how we're juggling those. And our first step toward that was to set out and now to have quarterly updates on our operational plan. So when we do come back, the next report on that will be in September. So we'll be able to give you at that time what's been pushed around due to the most recent council decisions. And we've also been contemplating how to be even more proactive with some of these decisions so that you can clearly see, for example, things that came up on the pending list that might not have been expected given council's direction at the time of budget. So I like the question. We will proactively address it in September on the overall report back. I think that would address Councillor Jeffrey's challenge to all of us to consider the bigger picture when we make decisions on the allocation of resources. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Councillor Jeffrey nodding, so I'm assuming that would address your concerns, Councillor. Good, thank you. Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I just wanted a quick clarification from either Director Slamo or the CAO or both, because there's been a lot of ideas thrown around, but the memorandum last week stated that staff recommended with option 3. But with everything we've talked about tonight, I wanted to know if they're still recommending option 3 or has that changed? So if one or both could answer that, please.
All right, thank you. I'll start with Director Slama and then go to the CAO. Go ahead, Director.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Berman. So staff are still recommending option 3. We think there's value, right, in completing some studies and getting a better understanding of where we're really seeing issues in our town and where we might see the most benefit of a reduced speed reduction. And it will also help identify for us other considerations that are related to road safety. So we do still recommend option 3. It is a more comprehensive look at road safety for Collingwood. And it would be, as we say, something that would be included in the budget for budget deliberations, and it would be delivered in 2022.
Thank you. CAO, anything to add to that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Berman, I agree. We are still recommending option 3. There is latitude for council to look at other options. All the options provided in the memo at the last meeting remain viable for council to choose from, including simply saying just do it, doing a more intensive study, or doing a less intensive study, which is similar to the Guelph approach, which is option 3. So they did a speed survey and they looked at what, the types of collisions they were seeing and the types of the approach that they would take. And that's a similar approach that we would recommend for our own community. And I do see some value in the public consultation, in part because it's hard for an individual councillor to hear from the full community. And in part because this is a bit of a two-way street. I mentioned last week, at our last conversation on this, that speed limits are not speed limiters. This is a tacit agreement with the driver that they will agree with and comply with the limits that are posted on signs. It has to be a part of the culture of the town, not only the enforcement by our Collingwood police. And I think a part of that is convincing people why this makes sense and communicating with them the benefits of that, and also asking them about some of their concerns so that we can make sure that we're able to address them as a part of the work. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to look for someone who hasn't yet spoken. And Councillor Madigan, you've got your card up. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. Thank you, Councillor Berman, for bringing that up. That was going to be my question as well, just to get clarification. I want the most comprehensive way to look at this as we possibly can. I will echo Councillor Jeffries. I have heard way more nays to yays on this, and that doesn't mean that nay is right. That doesn't mean that yay is right. It's just I have heard a lot of negativity. And in fact, one lady said to me yesterday, how can I voice my no? And I said, great question. I'll let you know after tomorrow night. So this is great that we're going to use Engage Collingwood. And on the Guelph thing, having Mayor Guthrie be a friend of mine and a customer for over 25 years, I've known him before politics. I will say in the conversation I had with him, it wasn't as easy as just doing it. But they're a major municipality, a lot bigger than we are. But I will be voting for option 3, giving the staff the option that they're asking for to come back with the most information so we can make the best decision rather than just going out there and doing it, much like we've learned from the past of just putting up an arena or a pool. Just doing it sometimes doesn't always work out. So thank you.
Thank you. I think everyone's had a first opportunity to speak, and there was a number of second cards. I'm going to restrict it to 2 comments per person. So I've got Councillor McLeod, then Councillor Comey, and then the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So what I'm going to say is that earlier in this very meeting, we voted to override our traffic calming plan, which we passed just a couple of weeks ago, with specific concerns raised about Finley Drive and all around our schools, because those areas are perceived to be unsafe currently. But the areas around our schools and on Findlay, all the way from here, Ontario to High and back again, are already 40. And yet they're perceived to be unsafe and we need extra traffic calming. So I'm a little concerned about the 40 thing. It seems to me that if we voted to put in extra measures, we are admitting that 40 may not be safe. And so maybe it's 30 that we need to go to. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And I would like to find out. I'm not against 40. I'm not against 30. I'm not against 50. I want a comprehensive report that is Collingwood specific. So I'm going to be making my decisions based on facts and not perceptions or feelings. And so I'm going to be supporting item 3, which is that we get the information that we need to make the best decision for our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a recorded vote, please.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I don't disagree that there are people who have conveyed their concerns about 40, but in the same context, I can't recall any person who's reached out to me to say that they wish that they could go faster or that they can't get around this community. I mean, I think that we can agree that we have an issue in this community as it relates to the speeds. And Councillor Hamlin, I applaud you for bringing this forward. I think that it would have probably been much straightforward if we had just done a blanket -10 right across the board. So if it's 70, it's 60. If it's 50, it's 40. In terms of this will be my very last comment. The supporting evidence is there. If we hire the right consultant, they're going to use the evidence that is already there. And they're going to come forward with the recommendation that we're talking about tonight. And I'd rather be part of the communities who are progressively moving forward than, continuing to debate whether or not we should be doing something that clearly from those, and I fully acknowledge I'm getting a sample size, but from those who have reached out to me, they are concerned about community safety, speeds, and they want something done today, not tomorrow.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm going to go back to you, Councillor Doherty. You had an amendment that you wanted to put on the floor dealing with option 2.
Yes, thank you. So it would be that council request consultation commence with the community such as through engage Collingwood to confirm the community's desires with respect to speed limits in the town of Collingwood. And I would also add and further thoughts and ideas from the community that we may have not even thought of. So that would be the amendment, and then it would go on to option 2 as already laid out here.
All right, and we have a seconder for that. Councillor Jeffrey. All right, there has been a request for a recorded vote, so I will pass it to the clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. So a recorded vote has been called. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your yes cards. And all those opposed to the amendment, please raise your no cards. And the amendment is defeated.
All right. Before passing the vote to the clerk for option 2 as initially proposed, I do think safety is an issue in our community, and we're hearing it from our residents, and we're taking action to do that. But most of the actions we're taking are being done with based on what's good for Collingwood, and I think the best interests of the community have to be the predominant concern. And I'm not convinced that Orangeville and Guelph undertaking studies and doing it themselves based on what's good for their communities is the platform we need to do that. I'm quite prepared to look for that under option 3, but will not be supporting option 2 because I think every community is different and we need to know where we need these speed limit controls. And as Councillor McLeod pointed out, making it at 40 zone does not necessarily make it the safest zone. And that's why we've passed the motion for the interim traffic control measures. So that being said, I'll pass it to the clerk to call the vote, please.
Your Worship, so that all those in favor of option 2, please raise your yes cards. And all those opposed to option 2, please raise your no cards. And the motion is defeated.
And that brings us to option 3 that reads, the council requests that staff include in the 2022 budget deliberations the cost to retain a consultant to provide a comprehensive report considering speed reductions in the town of Collingwood, including a review of the matters identified in the Public Works memo dated June 21, 2021 pertaining to option 3. Can I get a mover and a seconder to get that on the floor, please? Got Councillor Madigan and Councillor Berman. We've had good discussion all around. I think we know where we are. Councillor McLeod, go ahead.
I'd be happy to propose that the amendment Councillor Doherty proposed for consultation on this issue be attached to this option.
All right, I'll look for a seconder for that. Councillor Jeffrey, comments or questions on the amendment on the floor? Seeing none, I'll pass it to the deputy clerk. I'm assuming Councillor Comey, you'd like a recorded vote on this? All right then.
Thank you, Your Worship. So all those in favor of the amendment for option 3, please raise your yes cards. And all those opposed to the amendment for option 3, please raise your no cards. And the motion is carried.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. And I will now call the vote on the main motion, which is option 3, and look to the clerk for the recorded vote, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So all those in favor of option 3, please raise your yes cards. And all those opposed, please raise your no cards. And the motion is carried.
All right, thank you. And that brings us then to item 9, notices of motion. And I am going to pass the chair to the deputy mayor, please.
Thank you. Through you to my colleagues. A notice of motion was prepared and circulated to each of us earlier this afternoon. And I'll turn it back to Mayor Saunderson to read in his motion. And then would you like to speak to it first or go around the table?
I think first what I have to do, Deputy Mayor, is ask for council to consider waiving notice given the time constraints.
My apologies. Yes, you're absolutely correct. Thank you. So I will then first, again, so this was something that was circulated to each of us earlier today. And I will then ask for somebody to move and second to have this, the notice waived. So Councillor Madigan and Councillor Jeffrey. And I will, Mayor Saunderson, if you very briefly just speak to the significance of why you're tabling this.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. This motion relates to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that published its report in 2015. There were 94 calls to action, 6 of which impacted on unmarked child graves at the residential schools. And similar to our motion on the anti-hate legislation and discriminatory legislation, and our plea to the federal government, whose jurisdiction in the Indigenous affairs are, and the caucus, the summer caucus for FCM is July 12th. And so in order to get this resolution before the caucus in advance, to get it to the federal government as soon as possible, we need to waive notice, failing which we will miss that deadline by a long shot.
Okay. So with that understanding and with a mover and a seconder in place, then I will call the vote to waive notice this evening. All those in favor, please. Okay, and that's carried unanimously. And just for the record, through myself, I guess, through to the Deputy Clerk, Councillor Comey has left the meeting. And as she had indicated earlier tonight, it's a special evening for her and her family, her daughter in particular. So she's recused herself. So with that said, I will then look for Councillor Saunderson. Do you have Mayor Saunderson, do you have a seconder for your notice?
I do.
Councillor Jeffrey?
Yeah, Councillor Jeffrey.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. With that, I'll let you read in your motion, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Whereas the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was created in 2007 as a result of the settlement of the Indian residential schools class action, the largest class action in Canadian history. And whereas the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released its final report in 2015 and devoted volume 4 of the report to missing children and unmarked graves. And whereas the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as part of its findings in volume 4 of the report, identified 3,200 deaths of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's register of confirmed deaths of named residential school students and the register of confirmed deaths of unnamed residential school students. And whereas the Truth and Reconciliation Commission issued 94 calls to action and calls 71 to 76 inclusive were under the heading Missing Children and Unmarked Graves, call on the federal government to, together with all levels of government, to work collaboratively with Indigenous communities across Canada to develop and implement strategies and procedures for the ongoing identification, documentation, maintenance, commemoration, and protection of residential school cemeteries or other sites at which residential school children were buried. And whereas it took 6 years before the recent discoveries of the 966 unmarked graves of Indigenous children at the sites of the former residential schools in British Columbia and Saskatchewan, and we know this tragic work is just starting. And whereas after 6 years, only 10 calls to action have been completed. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Council petition the Canadian government to take the immediate action to address calls to action 71 to 76, including but not limited to: 1, to allocate sufficient resources to the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation to allow it to develop and maintain the National Residential School Student Death Register. And 2, to inform the families of children who died at residential schools of the child's burial location and to respond to families' wishes for appropriate commemoration ceremonies and markers and reburial in home communities where requested. And 3, to work collaboratively with the Indigenous communities across Canada to develop and implement strategies and procedures for the ongoing identification, documentation, maintenance, commemoration, and protection of residential school cemeteries or other sites at which residential school children were buried. And further, that this resolution be forwarded to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities as soon as practical and prior to the resolution cutoff for resolution submissions from municipalities to FCM, which is July 12th, 2021. That is the motion, and I'm happy to speak to it now, Deputy Mayor. And
sorry, please do.
Thank you. We've seen over the past 2 weeks that 966 unmarked graves have been discovered. We know, based on what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission found, that this is likely the start, as there are over 3,000 unmarked graves and estimates that go much higher. And I believe that the federal government over 6 years has taken little action, despite its claims, to progress down this road, and that confronting the truth of this is critical for our reconciliation efforts. And hearing and listening to the stories and confronting that truth are pivotal if we're going to move forward with our Indigenous communities across Canada. And I was struck by the weekend on an op-ed piece I read in the National Post. Melissa Mbarki, a writer of Cree, Métis, and French descent, was talking about the Canada Day and Canada Day celebrations being for all Canadians. And the question she posed in her article was if any levels of government that had canceled their Canada Day celebrations had first consulted with their Indigenous communities. And she writes, "This is a lesson all Canadians and the Canadian governments should take to heart. Indigenous people should be consulted before making decisions on our behalf. This is the respectful thing to do. But it is also the case that there is a lot of work to be done on reconciliation, on searching for the other bodies of children who died at residential schools, and on a host of other issues affecting Canada's First Nations. We appreciate support from outside communities, but we need to make sure the decisions made reflect the views of the people in our communities." And I believe that the recommendations 71 through 76 call for that type of collaboration, and that all levels of government, led by the federal government and the provincial governments, work with our Indigenous communities and other stakeholders to locate these children, to confront this truth, and so that we can move forward with true reconciliation with our Indigenous communities across the country and in Simcoe County. And for that reason, I grant the motion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I've got it right that time. Is there anybody around the table who would either like to speak to, have a question? Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Could not have said it better myself than what the Mayor just proposed. The only thing I would ask is wherever we refer to in the motion levels of government, that we would reference orders of government. It's a bugaboo at FCM. We're very much, the municipality is very much an order of a government, no more, no less in the levels of government, and we are closest to the people. So just that minor tweak.
I'm happy to make that change. Thank you, Councillor.
Fair enough. I would suggest we're at the top of the pyramid, but others would disagree. So anyway, is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Hall. As Councillor Jeffrey said, well said. And this is a happy moment that I'm going to ask for a recorded vote, because I think this is one thing that our community should know we all stand behind. And I would like to get it on the record for our wonderful mayor that he put this forward and that the whole of council would support him. I'm not saying that you have to, but I'm assuming that you will, because it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Madigan. And calling for the last time, would anyone else like to speak to the motion? So with a recorded vote being requested, I will turn it over to Deputy Clerk Dahl. I think we've got Mayor Saunderson, the mover, Councillor Jeffrey, the seconder. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ho. So all those in favor of the motion, please raise your yes cards. And that is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I'll turn the chair back over to Mayor Saunderson.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Council, for entertaining that motion that was brought on short notice, given the events of the weekend and today's busy schedule. And with that said, Deputy Mayor, I'm actually going to be passing it right back to you, right? Item 10, which is the county report.
Thank you. I just I wanted to, I think, speak to three things, or two in brief, and then one maybe a little bit more detail. The first two is that one, there has been some reporting as to issues as it relates to the two buildings that are under the direction of the County of Simcoe at the corner of High and Second. These are fantastic facilities, significant financial investment in our community. But that's not to say that there have not been concerns raised by residents. And the staff took a look at issues as it related to the community and came to County Council with a proposal to increase staff level to the tune of 3 additional staff members. And that was passed at our last meeting and will be implemented. So that is a positive step forward. Twofold: one, to ensure that the resident experience as is the way it should be, and two, to protect the long-term investment of the buildings as a whole. My apologies, I've got a bit of a tickle. The second that I just would like to mention is that from a very high level, from a macro perspective, County Council at Committee of the Whole requested that staff bring forward a budget for consideration with the direction that we look at a number around 2%. And so that is the number that we are starting at when considering our deliberations for 2022. And then the last item I just would like to touch on is the matter of the implementation of the new waste collection system coming November of 2022. And I'm going to start with a bit of levity, but I want you to know that I take this quite seriously. So please don't think it anything else. And that is that, you know, if we were to implement a new municipal transit route, I think that we would, it's a bit of a Goldilocks story. We would probably get 3 or 4 calls. And the first call would be that they're ecstatic. This is a great investment in the community. Second call is that this is a waste of taxpayers' dollars. Third call is that somebody would be upset that the bus stop is being directly out front of their house. And the fourth call would be that the bus stop is too far away from their home because they want to use it. And the point is that when you're making broad investments from a municipal standard or perspective, or from any other government, it's difficult to implement something on such a wide basis that will please everyone. So I want to go back to the genesis and a couple of things. One is that waste collection is probably one of the best investments that a resident can make. In fact, in terms of what you're paying through your taxes, you're paying less than you would be paying for your monthly, Bell or Rogers bill, depending on your services. That's 1 month. So you're getting 52 weeks of service for the cost of essentially 1 month of a service like Rogers or Bell. The second is that the cost of waste collection continues to rise and the return continues to decline. We've seen plummets in the markets as it relates to recyclables, and we've seen costs continue to increase as it relates to labor the type of vehicles that are in use in terms of their age, their replacement. And quite frankly, what we've witnessed over a period of time prior to COVID and then exacerbated through COVID is the fact that and Collingwood was quite lucky, but when we look at it from a county perspective, there were a number of areas that went a couple of weeks at times without proper collection. And that's unacceptable. And that's what led to the decision to move forward in a new progressive direction. And that was that we recognized that the current system wasn't working, that the nature of the labor-intensive work that's required, and it is very labor-intensive, was not attracting enough people to fill the positions. And therefore, we looked as a county, and county staff recommended that we go to the bin collection system, a system that is generally widely used throughout North America and continues to be a best practice. Now, that's not to suggest that there aren't issues and that each community isn't unique. But again, when we go back to the macro and we look at sort of the past, I look forward to the fact that I'll be able to roll out a bin to the end of the street and have confidence in knowing that probably on the Wednesday or in 2 days after collection, I won't be picking up recycling that's been blown down the street or garbage in black bags that was torn apart by seagulls, that type of thing. Because that tends to be the nature of the collection system that we have today. And it's more evident, in our beautiful downtown, where every weekend we go through this issue of collection, items being put out on the curb well in advance, and then either through Mother Nature or the creatures within our community find waste and debris spread out, and then staff resources, not county staff resources, but staff resources, either through the municipality or through the BIA or individual tenants and landowners downtown, taking the time to have to clean up after the fact. And so again, that was another driving force for why this waste collection system would be such a proactive move within the community. There have been concerns raised, and the mayor and I are in receipt, and I know that you as councillors are in receipt as well from residents who are concerned regarding the bin size itself and where they will be housed, either within a garage or failing to have a garage adjacent to the home, etc. Or within the downtown core, I'm working with the BIA because we've got concerns about, how are all of these bins going to work for main floor commercial when you've got second, third floor residential and you've got multiple dwellings, etc. So these are all things that we're looking at. And the good news is that we've got time between now and November to address them. The mayor has committed, and earlier at some point this week, there will be waste collection bins arriving within our community. They're going to be housed over at our library, and residents who are interested in going and actually physically taking a look at the size and being able to see, what they look like, how they look side by side, etc. Because a picture paints 1,000 words, and in seeing it in person, I think will be even better. But the mayor's taking it a step further, and he's agreed to actually take the bins and visit some of these communities or the neighborhoods that have expressed concerns where they don't have maybe proper storage available. So it's something proactive that's being done by the mayor to help to either alleviate concerns or to speak with residents about how moving forward concerns can be addressed, etc. The bins themselves, to the best of my knowledge, have been purchased. It's a significant expense for the taxpayers, for the investors of the community. There is a pilot project that is underway to the south of us, to a community in, I want to say New Tecumseh, but I stand to be corrected, but it is to the south of us. And based on the findings of the pilot there is the potential that there could be changes as it relates to the size and the use for some communities. And I shouldn't say communities, I should say neighborhoods. But overall, if I go back to the big picture, the macro, and the macro is that, you know, we all know and we all have witnessed garbage that is either put out way too, is destroyed by animals, is blown through Mother Nature down the street through high winds, snow, rain, whatever the case may be. These bins are really quite proactive. They are, you know, they deter animals. Thankfully, we don't have a significant raccoon population, et cetera, as maybe some of our southern communities do. But the fact is that these things can take on raccoons, they can take on bears, et cetera. They are easy to maneuver. They are designed with people who have accessible needs. They are designed for those who may be physically are challenged to be able to be easily tipped and moved from a mobile standpoint. And I think that people, once they have an opportunity to touch and feel and maneuver them, will embrace how easy they are to get from the side of the home, from the garage, down to the street and back. And for all of these things, I think that they will be well received once they are implemented come November. So my message to council is that if residents have concerns, I would direct them first to simco.ca. There's a portal that has been set up specific to waste management and the bins. There is a comprehensive section directed at the FAQ. There are videos that are available for viewing, etc. Failing that, if somebody wants to come and actually physically see, touch, take a look, we will announce through the municipality when they have arrived at the library, but they'll be available for people to see. And failing that, if there are additional concerns or questions, we received some tonight via email. Feel free to direct them through to myself and the mayor, because it is a massive undertaking. 16 member municipalities, geography that is inconsistent across the board. You've got urban core from a downtown like Collingwood to tiny Tay, Ramara, which is predominantly rural recreation. And all of these things had to be taken in with regards to the consideration of the implementation of the system. Lastly, there are a few one-offs, and I won't get into the specifics, but Councillor Jeffrey had an incident this week where a constituent brought forward a very specific issue as it related to a commercial property. And again, I would just simply ask that if you receive something from a constituent here, pass it along to the mayor. That would be great. And he'd be more than happy to take it to the county on your behalf and report back. But anyway, so those are the steps. Please encourage people to check out the website at simco.ca, look for the portal specific to the waste bin collection, have a look at the videos, have a look at the FAQ. Doesn't answer your questions, come, touch, feel, take a look at these bins when they arrive at the library. And failing that, reach out to us and we'd be happy to try and answer any questions. And with that, I think I'll leave that.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. It is an important initiative, and so when the bins are here, certainly come and have a look at them. And the transition date is November 1st. So this coming fall, November 1st, will be the transition date. And that takes us, unless there's any other questions or comments on that, Councillor Hamlin, go ahead.
Thank you. Two questions, I guess. The first one is on the question of size that you mentioned, and that I've had several people say to me, why can't we have a range of sizes like other municipalities do that have brought in this kind of a system? And I know, Deputy Mayor Hall, you mentioned, there could be changes coming. Is this at all anything the county staff's looking at this time?
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So I want to be cautious, and I don't want to be premature in my comment when I say that changes could be coming. I've received, as the mayor, as everyone around the table has received, concerns about the sizes, and that other municipalities have got, various or adapted to various sizes. I think, though, what I would say is that the sizes have been adapted, say, to a neighborhood, not an individual use. That's my understanding. Because the bins belong to the property. And the thought process behind it is that, for a person who maybe is living in a home today where it's one or maybe two persons, when they sell the home, perhaps they sell the home and it's a family of 5 that move in. And therefore, obviously, the change in use in terms of waste collection probably would change. And the appropriate bins would already be there to accommodate that change from 2 to 5 people, potentially, and vice versa. Where the county is looking at in this community to the south of us is a specific area. And so that would be similar to some of the communities or neighborhoods that we've got locally where, quite frankly, there are some constraints as it relates to the design, the original design of the community in terms of just the road width itself. The proximity from garage to garage, surely because of the density of the number of units on a street, and then the physical size of the garage itself. And I don't want to diminish or downplay that. But in making the decision with regards to the size of bins, I actually looked at my garage as an example. And I have a single car garage, fairly modest home in the heart of Collingwood. And my garage is no bigger than many of the garages to which we have received correspondence from. I know this simply because I wear another hat and I have access to builder plans. That's all. And just compare the width and the depth. I, in the wintertime, use my garage for my vehicle, for a hockey net, 3 bikes, 3 sets of golf clubs, etc. And it's a choice, it's consumer choice. I acknowledge that's maybe not the case everywhere, but I do suggest that when people have an opportunity to actually see the bins, and when they see them side by side, and they see what maybe their current bin plus 2 blue bins take in terms of width, I think that they'll be pleasantly surprised that the footprint is very similar, and that they in fact actually will be able to maximize and take better advantage of these bins. That's my hope. So, but to answer your specific question, which I apologize, I know you asked an hour ago, but when I come full circle, the county's committed to going through that trial period, and then they will be reporting back. So that trial period, unfortunately, doesn't commence until the implementation, which is November the 1st. So we won't have that information back to us at the county until probably well into the new year of 2022. And I think there was a second question.
Yes, there is.
Okay. Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. When this program was announced, I had a discussion with our former planning director about whether when new communities are being designed, he could ensure that the garages were deep enough or whatever is necessary to make sure these bins could be stored. And he said that he had tried this and developers were giving him such significant pushback, he wasn't getting anywhere. So the reason I raise this is whether any discussion can be had with county staff to talk to the local, to perhaps our planning staff around, what tools might be available or how the county could help our community make sure that our developers are doing the right thing when it comes to designing for these bins. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, and the deputy mayor indicated that while the bins have larger volumes, they're taller. Their actual footprint generally is not much bigger than your current garbage can or 2 blue bins. So people may find that it's not as tight a crunch as they are expecting, certainly when you look at the size difference. But the bins we're told through other municipalities as well, are very user-friendly. They're easy to move. So even if they're very full, it's not hard to move them. So we're the hope is that when these bins are issued, that will help to resolve people's concerns. And beyond that, the deputy mayor's correct. There is a pilot project down in New Tecumseh, and based on that, there may be an opportunity to get smaller units. So that it's a possibility, but not a definite. And we will raise that concern with planning staff at the county.
Yeah, just one last comment on that, Mr. Mayor, is that I think particularly with the emphasis on smaller units, affordable units, everything shrinks. And when you have a row of townhomes, and if the garages are shrinking, you end up, I've seen in other communities, you end up with these garbage bins on the front porch. So that's what we're trying to avoid. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor's got his hand up. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Just to that, purely by coincidence, my mother sent me a photograph about a month ago. I shared it with Councillor Doherty, and it's a home in the east end of Toronto where it was her parents' first home. And it was a couple of things struck me. One is it's in kind of a Tony area of Toronto right now, but back then it was part of the working class. And as my father always says, when people ask, what's your ancestry, his response is peasant. And anyway, so we came from the peasant stock in the east end of Toronto. The house, it's interesting, today is a really cool, very modern design in terms of the architecture of the outside, but the footprint hasn't changed. It's 17 feet wide, no garage, no back lane, and no parking. There's not a driveway. And what struck me, and I'll share it with everyone, I'll send the photo, is that in this beautiful home that's now $1 million plus home, there was the garbage bin. But it was tucked away sort of in a way that it wasn't obtrusive, but it was there. But that's the reality. And it's a reality just in a neighborhood that was built, pre-First World War, exists still today with those conditions. And those conditions are no driveway, no back lane, no garage. And yet it's $1 million plus property today. So anyway.
Good. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I don't see any other questions, so we'll move on then to council business. 11.1, old or deferred business. Is there any old or deferred business tonight, council? Seeing none, we'll move on then to other business. 11.2.1, FCM annual conference update. We have Councillors Doherty and Jeffrey. I will pass it over to the two of you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. So I'm very pleased to be doing this joint presentation with Councillor Doherty, and I want to thank her for the slides. I do not have any graphic design talents. And it was a pleasure for me to have Councillor Doherty yet again. I think she's only missed one of the FCM conferences that I've been at for sure, and to have Mayor Saunderson there as well for the price of $679 and no travel and the ability to multitask staying at home. It was a great opportunity to learn a lot. So I guess moving on to the second slide, which is called highlights. Councillor Doherty, were you doing some of this, or am I just doing the notes that I had here?
I think we got it.
Yeah, you're going to handle slide 2 and I'm going to do slide 3. We're all very democratic here.
Yeah, I've got it here. I just didn't know. All right, so you can see the highlights there. 1,000 municipal participants from across Canada focusing on some really important things for a recovery for us economically through health and social as a result of the pandemic. And it says something to be able to have 4 of the national leaders there from the parties in Canada, because sometimes an opposing party will send a representative. And given the fact that we were coming out of a pandemic and they are looking at an election, it was pretty phenomenal that we had all 4 leaders speak to us about their vision. And as I always tell you, FCM is nonpartisan. So we did have many featured keynote presentations, panel discussions, workshops, and virtual trade show. And this was FCM's first virtual AGM, and it was a huge success. So just to let you know, Collingwood was mentioned in the CEO's opening comments as one of 2 examples of municipalities. Wood Buffalo, Alberta was the other one, pivoting and reallocating resources during the pandemic. And also to let you know that Acting Executive Director Dean Culver was recognized in the FCM PowerPoint at the gala as we celebrated and acknowledged the staff, outstanding municipal staff across Canada. And so we're very happy to celebrate Dean in that. There was only 12 from all across Canada that were highlighted. And also I wanted to speak a little bit about the one keynote speaker who was Canadian Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, who spoke about his motivation and experience to opt out of a lucrative NFL contract with Kansas City, I think it's Kansas City, for 1 year to return to Montreal to use his medical degree as a doctor to work as an orderly in a long-term care facility. So doing his part to contribute positively to the pandemic. And so CFL former player Danny De Silva was the interviewer, and I can tell you he was definitely fanboying over Larry and his incredulous decision. So it was quite an interesting story for us to experience. So also the other highlight, of course, was our resolution for the federal government and the definition of hate speech, which was passed by more than 90% of the delegates. And I think a few people just went to the bathroom at the wrong time. And then, of course, the election on the national board, which I'm happy to announce that I was successful in going to the national board once again. So I'll pass it on for slide 3 for Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Councillor. So touching on one of the main themes out of the conference was addressing social inequity, racism, and the building of inclusive communities. And not surprisingly, the discovery of the graves of 215 children at a residential school in BC was at the forefront of the remarks of most of the speakers, it having just been discovered a few days before the conference opened. The breakout sessions explored chronic social and economic disparities in Canadian society that have really been highlighted by COVID, as well as gender inequality in politics today. And we were lucky enough to speak from, or to hear from Member of Parliament for Peterborough-Kawartha, Miriam Monsef, who is Canada's Minister for Women and Gender Equality and Rural Economic Development, who was featured on a panel tackling online harassment of elected female representatives, which is among one of the major deterrents to equal participation by both sexes, and sadly noting that participation of women in politics is actually on the decline right now. Knowing that, FCM has announced a new Canadian Women in Local Leadership, or CAN-WILL initiative, which will take the form of $1.5 million investment in Women and Gender Equality Canada, and it will be a 3-year pilot project. The other thing that was very interesting, we heard from speakers from other municipalities where diversity is very much a part of their social fabric. So for example, Laval, Quebec is the second largest city in Quebec and has the highest diversity in Quebec, with 50% of residents of immigrant origin. They are recognized by UNESCO. They have generated a strategic plan for 2035 that would address inequality, racism, and the building of inclusive communities. And it calls for the mobilization of partners at all levels of government, plus NGOs, plus institutions. They are making multiculturalism count in every aspect of their operations, from hiring to education to social services. And Laval has also put forward 60 projects to the province to tackle inequality and build inclusiveness. And this has been just since 2016. I'll jump on to the next slide, please. On affordable housing, another major theme of the conference. We saw prominent presentations from a number of municipalities on affordable housing and on homelessness. Among the items, it was interesting that among the items that was discussed was a reference to the changing definition of what constitutes affordable housing or temporary housing, and what the role of temporary housing should be. And we saw the same theme touched upon our report from the consultant to our task force in the consent agenda. The Prime Minister announced the release of another $1.5 billion to support the Rapid Housing Project, in addition to $1 billion released earlier this year, for a total of $70 billion from the federal government to be targeted to various federal housing programs. Couple of notes. One speaker emphasized that we must use data to end homelessness, that numbers, percent change, costs, accommodations, the fundamental question must always be, are all our programs adding up to the thing that we want? And if not, how quickly can we pivot? Another thing that was of note under the affordable housing theme was that energy efficiency and net zero builds, which are funded either through the affordable housing or through the municipal, the Green Municipal Fund, are having very favorable impacts on the cost of operating affordable housing by various levels of government. Okay, and jumping back to Councillor Jeffrey for slide 5.
So I thought was a critical discussion at FCM was the conversation on the municipal workforce after COVID. And there was a lot of predictions. There will be an exodus from the brick and mortar workplace in the public sector, which obviously impacts our gathering places and our planning for future housing of staffing. And recognizing that some departments may remain a little less impacted than others, and that some municipalities may have to find creative ways to use surplus space. I'm not sure that'll be for us, but they have come up with some very creative ideas. And some of the things that were also spoken of was the implication of privacy for the town records and the significant security upgrades that are going to be required from IT if they have not already been done or done in part. And then additionally, a municipality in BC has already had its first injury claim from an employee working out of their home. So there's a lot of challenges, and I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on our municipal administration to find a way going forward to deal with the trend of working at home or coming back into the workplace and sharing docking stations and those kinds of ideas. And also a big discussion was on how municipalities and local businesses are going to have to consider different employment conditions to attract staff, given the whole generation which is retiring. And we were referring to on the slide here regarding Gen Z and the first generation that is completely digital. And one example that came up was assistance with loan payments. And there were a lot of other creative ideas that came out. So, so the one nugget that Councillor Doherty had referred to on the slide here is that the municipality of Perth Andover is considering renting its out surplus space to other businesses. So pretty serious discussion our municipality and all municipalities are going to have going forward. So back to Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. And this is our last slide, Mr. Mayor. I think we're probably approaching our 10 minutes. But the fourth and final theme at the conference was climate change mitigation and the Green Municipal Fund. I'm not going to read all the numbers. The Green Municipal Fund has been a massive success, and the feds continue to provide a top up to that funding, which is then administrated by FCM in the form of grants, loans, and funding may go to public, private, or combinations thereof. Just one example of a municipal project that was funded by the Green Municipal Fund, and this is speaking to waste, is Minto O'Donnell in Manitoba, a tiny little community in Manitoba, has, with help of the Green Municipal Fund, developed a zero waste system. They are taking garbage from 6 surrounding municipalities, compacting it and processing it in a gasification unit. And the gases are then used for power generation for buildings and vehicles. So very exciting what you can do with garbage. The key thing here, and this was emphasized by the speakers, but in my heart, I know that this is true, that green initiatives are becoming an important economic development strategy, and they will put the Canadian economy back on the rails coming out of COVID. And that's it.
All right, thank you very much, both of you, for that thorough report. Are there any questions or comments, Council? No, and it was my first FCM conference, and it was certainly great to see to have our resolution passed, and also to have Councillor Jeffrey be successful for yet another term. And how many terms is that now, Councillor? 10. Well done. That brings us to item 11.2.2, update on Ethnic Mosaic Alliance opportunity, and we have Acting Executive Director Culver here to take us through this. Good evening, Dean.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. Hello, everybody. If it's okay with you, I'm just going to quickly share my screen and hopefully run through a slide deck briefly, if I could.
Sure.
So hopefully you can see the front. Oh, not yet. There we go. Are you able to see my screen?
No.
No. Okay. That's not working very well. Let's go back. Let's try it a different way. How about this? Is that better?
Now you've got it. Yep.
Okay. Apologies. So I wanted to start off by saying that despite sort of where this update leads, I want you to know that the process of understanding and learning about the Ethnic Mosaic Alliance has been very positive, and staff believe strongly in the work they're doing and their reason for being, as well as this specific project to develop a multicultural center for the county of the region of Simcoe County. And so I don't want the takeaway from this to be that they are not on the right track. They absolutely are. But I think in an effort to support them, we want to make sure that we're positioning ourselves properly alongside them. And I'm sure we'll have a lot more to do, a lot more to build on in terms of a relationship with them. So let's see if I can, there we go. So going back to July of 2020, you had asked for us to sign a letter of interest. But the provisos in place were that there would be the support from the upper tiers of government, as well as that the outcome would be a win-win situation for all parties. And then just quickly, the Ethnic Mosaic Alliance, a not-for-profit organization. Its goal is to enrich Simcoe County communities by embracing, promoting, and celebrating cultural diversity. So the key asks of the RFP from the EMA were that there would be 2 acres of space provided. I will note that some of these requirements came out after the letter of intent. So as we were kind of going through this process of diligence and learning with the Ethnic Mosaic Alliance, we became more aware of what it is they were actually needing and looking for in an RFP outcome. But it was 2 acres of space to support a 20,000 square foot facility. Ideally, the space would be currently zoned. There would be opportunities for future expansion and further in-kind support from the host municipality. Ideally, that municipality would have existing policies that are in place and intending to attract, support, and serve diverse groups. There would be a 10-year memorandum of understanding for right of first refusal regarding the development of space identified for the multicultural center. So this is in the event that their grant application, their current grant application, was not successful. The land would be held for a period of 10 years while they sought other funding opportunities. And that they were also looking for a space that was central to the region, because obviously the area they want to serve is the region of Simcoe County with its enhanced and increasing diversity. So the key considerations for staff as we kind of went through the RFP process and information sessions with the EMA is that the conceptually proposed site at Harborview Park, it's not 2 acres. It's not 2 acres available there, nor is it currently zoned for that purpose. And then we also had to come to terms with the fact that, we're working towards the construction of the Awen water play facility, and we're expanding parking currently. That's the next project to be undertaken. And, but we also are expanding it on the basis that the water play will be that attractive and that parking area will be full. So it might, we can make an assumption that it would conflict with a 20,000 square foot space and the uses that are intended there. Collingwood definitely isn't geographically central to Simcoe County. As much as we know that we're the center of the world, we're not the center geographically in Simcoe County. So some of the communities that the multicultural center would be looking to serve would have to travel some distance to get here. The impacts on the waterfront master plan were something else that we had to analyze as well. As much as there was an affinity of cultural intent when it came to a multicultural center in Harborview Park and references in the waterfront master plan, staff are feeling a very heavy responsibility regarding the legacy of decisions surrounding the waterfront master plan and the waterfront spaces. So if this was not sort of the ideal fit, and then also encumbering the space for 10 years while we're in the midst of trying to continue to progress through the waterfront master plan, didn't seem to be consistent with the town's mandate. And then the expansion possibility that EMA was expecting, given that, and we agree that the facility would be very successful and will be very successful and probably require expansion at some point, we would just be exacerbating those conflicts that are already identified. So we do have a desire to support EMA properly in recognition of the role that we can play in that support. We did note in the information sessions that other high potential sites, other municipalities with high potential were showing interest in the project that are more central to Simcoe County, that are possibly more advanced when it came to policies around attraction and support for diverse communities. We're on the path, and I have no shame in terms of where we are, but we have a progress that we've embarked upon, that we have more work to do. And we will get there, but I have to admit that some other municipalities may be ahead of us in terms of policy development, and that's great because that gives us an example to work towards as well. And then just the land availability and proximity to support services, other municipalities may have a more advantageous opportunity than we do. So based on all of this, council gave a direction to look for a win-win scenario. We kind of feel that stepping aside would actually provide the win or support the win that EMA is looking for. We definitely support their work, support their existence, and would look forward to ongoing relationships to both help the community of Collingwood as well as support of the greater regional community. And also I'll note that through the RFP process, we looked at some learnings that were achieved in terms of how we could better support a multicultural community. Things like, and these are just examples that came up through some of the discussions that were held. English as a second language supports in our stakeholder service, for example, at customer service at Town Hall. Multicultural recognition and community building programs, which we've begun to discuss with in places like the Unity Collective. And then identification of specific services that can support and help new Canadians looking to build their home and create their space here in Collingwood or the area. So these are some avenues that we'd like to pursue going forward. And I know the council is supportive of those ideas, but this experience has given us some ideas about where we can gather more information and build resources. So with that all being said, staff are looking to withdraw from the competition, but again, with full support for the Ethnic Mosaic Alliance and what they're hoping to accomplish.
Thank you for that update, Dean. Council questions or comments? Councillor Hanlon.
Yes, I just comment through you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say thank you to Dean and staff for the hard work they put into, working this through to the point where, it was obvious it shouldn't go ahead. I'm also really happy with some of the learning opportunities that we have, because I think some of those things you mentioned, in the fullness of time would be helpful in our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Acting Executive Director Culver. And when do you get to shed that title and just go back to being director?
Mr. Mayor, I think this will be my last council meeting where you get to have the elongated title.
Okay. Well, we look forward to meeting the new full-time executive director and you getting back to your normal mandate. And thank you for that tonight. That brings us then to item 12, which is in camera. The resolution reads, whereas the clerk hereby concurs the reasons for the in-camera session have been duly reviewed and considered, and the matters are authorized under the exemption provisions to conduct a closed session in accordance with the Municipal Act prior to proceeding into closed session. Therefore, be it resolved that this council proceeds in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to 1, the receiving of advice that is necessary or that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, item A, and proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, which is also item A. And there are 2 items for discussion. Item A, the Culbert estate, and then item B, which is just in-camera confidentiality. So I will look for a motion for a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Jeffrey and the Deputy Mayor, and I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. There will be no rise in report from this in-camera session today. Council, it's now 2 minutes after 8, so we will reconvene in camera at 10 after 8 so that people can have a bio break, and we'll see you then shortly. Thank you. All right, Stephanie, let us know when we're ready to go, please.
Excuse me, Your Worship, you're live.
All right, thank you. All right, Council, I will need a resolution to rise from in camera at 8:29 p.m. moved by Councillor MacLeod and seconded by Councillor Berman. All in favor? Thank you. As indicated previously, there's no rise in report from today's session. which brings us to the confirmatory bylaw, item 13.1. And the resolution reads that bylaw number 2021-47 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of council held June 28, 2021, be enacted and passed this 28th day of June, 2021. Mover and a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Doherty. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And that brings us to, it was a very productive meeting, everyone. Thank you. And thank you to Councillor McLeod for teleporting in your auto for us. And Councillor Berman, you're on your way to Thunder Bay tomorrow. So enjoy your first beginnings, your Canada Day and the beginnings of July. And with that being said, I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Jeffrey, all in favor? Thank you very much, everyone. And Becky, great job today. You filled in despite your grumpy computer. All right, everyone, have a great night. Thank you.